Chapter 973. From the time we left the Rockfire Fortress to the peak of the Monster God realm, the Snake Spirit and I had walked for a year. Including the months of seclusion, we had spent a year and a half on the road. At this moment, there was only half a year left before the last ferocious beast in King City awakened. However, we were already not far from King City. Half a year was enough for us to travel. After meeting up with the Spirit Serpent on the Black Dragon Beast, the Spirit Serpent's aura was similarly majestic. When he blinked his eyes, his aura was restrained. It was obvious that he hadn't been slacking during this period of time. Even though his cultivation hadn't reached the great circle of the Monster God realm, he was at the peak of the late stage of the Monster God realm. He was only a step away from my cultivation. Even in the Demon region, our cultivation is only half a step lower than the Demon the Arch. If we work together, even the Demon the Arch will have to avoid us. It is not an exaggeration to say that we can run amok in the Demon region. Of course, there are realms above the Demon Emperor. Demon Emperor who is guarding Monarch City, is probably a top-notch existence among the Demon Emperors. It's not something we can speculate about. Therefore, we still have to keep a low profile during this trip to Monarch City. It's the safest move to act in secret like before. After the Spirit Snake saw me, it stared at me for a moment before saying in shock, "Did you advance to Dawn Ascension? Why haven't they ascended yet?" I glanced at him and said unhappily, "How can it be so easy? I'm only half a step into the Dusk realm. There's still a long way to go before I ascend. As for you, I haven't seen you for a few months, and you're not far from the Dusk realm either." The Spirit Snake chuckled and nodded. "I had nothing to do while you were in seclusion. I also released those apes. While I got bored, I went to the bottom of the lake. At first, I was just looking for the ferocious beasts at the bottom of the lake. Then one day, I met a half-beast man at the bottom of the lake. That guy had a bunch of horns on his face, which gave me a fright. At first, he wasn't very strong, so I didn't want to deal with him. But then I remembered that when the mountain and sea realm first opened and Wongli was in danger, you met a demon race who also looked like that. So I captured him and asked him about him. It turns out that guy is from the Eastern Province. His appearance is that of a large clan of the sea race. Apart from him, there are many other sea race living in the east of the Ruor River. The Spirit Snake surprised me. There was actually a sea race from the Eastern Province here. And the first demon race I met in the human realm was actually the sea race. This was really inconceivable. According to the impression I had when I was wandering in the demon domain, the Eastern Waters was the furthest region from the mountain and sea realm. Even with my current speed, it would take several years to cross the demon domain. How did the sea race from the Eastern Waters appear in the human realm so quickly? I didn't understand, so I quickly asked the Spirit Snake, "What happened next?" The Spirit Snake smiled proudly and continued, "After that, I got bored and went to the sea race's area to take a stroll. You don't say. The sea race really did have some ability. Their cultivation was ordinary, but most of the sea race could control ferocious beasts at the bottom of the sea. Some of them could even control ferocious beasts at the Demon God realm. Moreover, several of them attacked me at the same time. It took me a lot of effort to deal with them. Afterwards, when the sea race realized that they couldn't beat me, they all submitted to me. They even elected me as the city lord of Ruoxue City. They have a city in the Ruoxue Lake that is completely built with shells, corals, and the like. I don't even need to mention how beautiful it is. Of course, the most beautiful ones are the mermaid race and clam race girls. Just by looking at the Spirit Snake's wretched appearance, I could imagine what kind of debauched life he had in Ruoxue City. I naturally didn't care about him causing trouble for the sea race, but Ruoxue City was one of the sea race's cities. How could the sea race not care about him messing around there? I heard that the sea race in the Eastern Waters was the most powerful existence in the few provinces of the Demon region. Even if he was from the dragon race, there was no reason for the sea race to allow him to run amok, right? When I asked the Spirit Snake, he acted as if he didn't care. He waved his hand and said, "Someone told me that the sea race will send people over. But so what if they send people? Unless their Demon Emperor comes, can't I run away even if I can't beat them? But it doesn't matter now. We will leave immediately. Even if they come, they won't be able to find us." This guy was really a troublemaker. The sea race had fought with him before and knew his cultivation. If they sent people over to deal with the matter here, it would obviously not be easy to deal with them. Moreover, according to him, the sea race had the ability to control ferocious beasts. Since there was the existence of Demon Emperor among the beastmen in the demon region, it was hard to guarantee that there weren't any ferocious beasts of the same realm. If a ferocious beast of the Demon Emperor realm came, or a ferocious beast of the perfection of the demon god cultivation like me, the spirit snake might not be able to escape. He had a noble status in the dragon race. The sea race might not kill him, but he wouldn't be able to escape. Fortunately, I came out of seclusion early. Otherwise, this guy would most likely be at a disadvantage. Since the sea race was spying on us, I didn't dare to stay on the Weakwater Lake for too long. If I were to be entangled by the sea race, not only would it be troublesome, it would also affect the next step of the plan. Thus, I got the spirit snake to urge the dark dragon beast to rush towards King City at the fastest speed. In the past year, the spirit snake and I had consumed countless beast cores of the ferocious beasts. At this moment, the accumulated power in our body was already saturated. There wasn't much need to hunt for ferocious beasts in the remaining period of time. At full speed, we quickly passed through the last part of the Weakwater Lake. On an evening 10 days later, as the sun was setting, a black line could be faintly seen at the end of the lake. As we flew forward, a towering cliff suddenly appeared in front of us. Above the cliff, there were countless buildings of varying heights. At the very top, there was a tall and spacious building with a pointed roof. All of the buildings and the tall cliff were dyed with a layer of gold under the illumination of the setting sun. It looked like a golden city that was situated on the peak of a golden mountain. King City was different from the other big cities. King City was situated right next to the lake. The Ural Mountain Range originated from the Dragon's Pine Plateau and ran through most of the regions of the Monster Domain. The entire civilization of the Monster Domain seemed to be based on it. At the end of the Ural Mountain Range was the cliff at the bank of the Weakwater Lake. From the geographical shape, it seemed as though the power of the entire Ural Mountain Range had been gathered to give birth to the most dazzling pearl of the Monster Domain, King City. At the foot of the steep cliff, merchant ships were bustling about on the surface of the lake, continuously transporting goods to and from King City. Unlike the lake we came from, there were many mature and long waterways to the west and north, connecting King City with the two provinces in the northwest and the northwest that were relatively close to each other. The Spirit Snake and I obviously didn't need to enter King City through the pier at the foot of the cliff like these ships. We didn't stop at the cliff as we rode on the Dark Dragon Beast and flew into King City. As the noblest city in the Monster Domain, it was necessary to have strict air control. However, the Dark Dragon Beast, which was unique to the Dragon Clan, was obviously not within the scope of control. After flying into King City, the Dark Dragon Beast circled around in the sky. Very quickly, a whistle sounded from the ground, guiding the Dark Dragon Beast to land in a beast field. After coming out from the beast field, we officially arrived at King City. From its appearance and status, King City was different from the other cities in the Monster Domain. However, its interior wasn't much different from the other cities in the Monster Domain. In fact, the atmosphere of the marketplace was even denser, leaning towards the human world. There was still half a year's time before the last beast would awaken. Thus, the Spirit Snake and I weren't in a hurry and just strolled around King City. It didn't take long for us to understand the structure of King City. The entire King City was divided into two cities, the inner city and the outer city. The inner city was the royal city, where only the direct descendants of Emperor Per lived. The huge building with a pointed roof that we saw when we arrived was the Monster Emperor's palace at the center of the royal city. On the other hand, the outer city was the true King City. Countless races lived in it, be it the Wolf Tribe and the Bear Tribe in the northern province, the various Wing Tribes in the western province, the Sand Lizard Tribe and the Butterfly Tribe in the southern province, and even the Sea Tribe in the eastern province. All of them lived here. This was a huge city where all the races converged. Chapter 974. This news surprised me. In my impression, the other monster kings in the monster region were the ancestors of their clans. They had lived for hundreds of years. Why did the monster king of the sea race want to marry? Could it be that he was still a young man? After asking, I found out that the true ruler of the sea race was also an old monster. The young monster king of the sea race who wanted to marry the lion race princess was the grandson of that old monster. In other words, the sea race didn't only have one monster king, but two. No wonder it was said that the sea race was the most powerful in the monster region. They actually had two monster kings. Moreover, it was said that the young monster king was only 60 years old. According to the age of the sea race, he had just reached adulthood. Speaking of which, I could be considered the number one of the younger generation in the human world. This monster king of the sea race was undoubtedly the number one of the younger generation in the monster region. I couldn't help but feel the urge to challenge him. It was true that he was a monster king, but with my current cultivation, I wouldn't be inferior to him if we were to fight. After dealing with the last beast, I wouldn't mind fighting him if I had the chance. As I pondered, I stayed in the pub for a while. After I had my meal, I left with the snake spirit. It was still early, so I wasn't in a hurry to find a place to stay. Instead, I continued to stroll around King City, observing the most famous city in the monster region. Compared to the other big cities I had been to, there were many more types of monsters in King City. They all looked strange, and it was very different from the human world. However, after walking around for a while, I noticed that King City had a very strong market atmosphere. There were rows upon rows of shops on the streets, hawkers hawking their wares, and even a disabled gnome begging at the corner of the street. This kind of rich life atmosphere was very similar to that of a city in the human world. This is something I've never seen in the other large cities of the demon region that I've been to. As I was observing the snake spirit, and I walked into a street that had fewer people. The moment we entered, we bumped into a half-beast man with a big belly. From his body shape and the two fangs at the side of his mouth, he seemed to be from the wild boar race. It was obvious that he had purposely blocked our way. Without waiting for us to speak, he extended his hand. The entrance fee is 1 gold coin per person. Entrance fee? I thought I was in a place of entertainment. I craned my neck to take a look. There were only a few eateries and butcher shops on the street. Now, I understood that the fat boar man was running a bully. He didn't need to invest anything in his business. I glanced at the boar man and realized that he had a monster king cultivation base. If it was any other place in the demon territory, possessing the cultivation of a demon king would be considered a hero of an area, no matter what. Who would have expected that a dignified demon king would actually become a scoundrel in Royal City? This was slightly interesting. While we were still immersed in our curiosity, the boar man seemed to have lost his patience. He reached out and pushed us away, cursing, "Since when did dog-headed people and snake people get to stroll around the streets of King City? If you don't have any gold coins, then scram." In order to keep a low profile, I maintained my previous appearance of a kobold, while the spirit snake hid his dragon characteristics. After losing his dragon characteristics, he looked exactly like a snake. However, the spirit snake didn't like people calling him a snake. After hearing what the boar man had said, I instantly knew that something was wrong. I turned to grab the spirit snake, but it was too late. The spirit snake jumped 3 feet high. Without saying anything, he slapped the boar man's face. He glared at me and said, "Who did you say I am? If you have the guts, say it again." The spirit snake's voice was sharp. His roar attracted the gazes of the people in the surrounding eateries and butcher shops. After seeing the spirit snake's attack, the half-beastman's eyes widened in fright. It was obvious that the boar man was famous. The spirit snake's action of slapping him was something that the surrounding people didn't expect. The boar man didn't expect it either. He subconsciously covered his swollen cheek. His expression was blank for a moment. However, his eyes burned with anger after a moment, and his breathing became rapid. "You dare to hit me?" The boar man's face revealed a dangerous expression as he asked ferociously. Besides the eyes, the spirit snake had never been afraid of anyone, let alone this boar man who only had the cultivation of a monster king. Without saying anything, he jumped and kicked him. "Not only do I dare to hit you, I also dare to kick you." The boar man flipped 5 or 6 meters away. After he got up from the ground, he didn't want to waste his breath anymore. He roared, and the 2 fangs at the side of his mouth grew longer. He charged forward and charged at the spirit snake. Although his body was fat, the boar man's speed was very fast. In a blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the spirit snake. After a crisp sound, he flew back at an even faster speed and sat on the ground. The other half of his cheek was swollen. He finally understood that he had met a tough opponent. He looked bewildered. After spitting out a few broken teeth, he asked vaguely, "Who are you?" The spirit snake laughed. "I'll teach you a lesson. I am." Without waiting for him to finish, I interrupted him. "Hurry up and deal with him. Let's leave this place." Even if the spirit snake and I had powers that weren't inferior to the monster emperor, I didn't want to cause any trouble before we dealt with the last beast. After the spirit snake heard what I said, he angrily shut his mouth. He flicked his finger and shot a beam of monster power at the sea of chi below the boar man's abdomen. After destroying his cultivation, he snorted coldly. "This is your punishment for offending me. As for my identity, you don't deserve to know." After saying that, he patted his butt and left. When we left the street, there were many people outside who heard the commotion. They stared at us. I exerted more force on my feet and left with the spirit snake in a few swaying movements. After avoiding everyone's gaze, the spirit snake asked me with a guilty conscience, "We didn't expose our identities. It shouldn't affect anything, right?" I didn't bother with him and lifted my head to take a look. I noticed that there was a large-scale inn. I took the lead and walked in. I asked for a room and stayed there. The night passed uneventfully. When I woke up the next morning, there was a knock on the door. The spirit snake and I exchanged glances. We both felt that something was wrong. It was obvious that there was a monster saint's aura outside the door. Even though there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in King City, it was impossible for the people in this inn to have such a high cultivation. Could it be that the previous day's matter had attracted someone to investigate? I hesitated for a moment, but didn't think too much about it. The spirit snake and my disguise wasn't something that a monster saint would be able to see through. If the previous day's matter attracted the law enforcement department's investigation, it wouldn't be difficult for me to use a high-grade beast core to settle the matter. I nodded and gestured for the spirit snake to open the door. Just as the door opened, I was instantly stunned. A blonde and beautiful young woman stood outside the door. From her attire and demeanor, it was obvious that she wasn't a government official. Moreover, she didn't walk in after the door opened, but stood there and looked at me in a daze. After frowning for a moment, I suddenly reacted. This blonde woman was the cat lady Wei Weian that I had met in Rock City. It had been a few years, and with her dazzling blonde hair, I didn't recognize her at first. After staring at me in a daze for a moment, Wei Weian lowered her head and walked in. She asked me, "Duo-G, do you still remember me?" Back in Rapid City, Wei Weian had shown some affection for me. Even though I didn't take it to heart, I felt uncomfortable looking at her affectionate gaze. After avoiding her gaze, I smiled. "How could I not remember you? You're the only lion race. No, the royal race member that I know. After a few years, you've already reached the monster saint cultivation. Congratulations." Wei Weian's expression recovered slightly, and her eyes were filled with joy. "You're still the same as before, making it impossible for me to see through your cultivation. It can't be that you've already reached the monster god cultivation, right?" I shook my head. "It's only been a few years. How is that possible?" Wei Weian continued to smile. "It's definitely impossible for others, but that's not necessarily the case for you." Seeing that her tone was becoming increasingly intimate, I hurriedly stopped the topic and asked, "I just arrived in King City yesterday. How did you find me?" Chapter 975. The reason why Vivian was able to find me was obviously related to how the spirit snake crippled the wild boar race member. Even though the wild boar race member was a hoodlum, he had the cultivation of a monster king. It would be weird if the spirit snake didn't come looking for him. I had intended to use a few high-grade beast pills to settle this matter, but I didn't expect that Vivian would be involved. The truth was just as I had guessed. Hearing my question, Vivian smiled and said, "This matter is also a coincidence. Last night, I coincidentally went out and heard people discussing a fight. They said that among the perpetrators, there was a powerful dog-headed man who crippled a monster king's cultivation in the streets. At that time, I had a feeling that it was you. Last night, after the King City Patrol team found some clues, I thought that I would only be reassured if I personally came to take a look. I didn't think that it would really be you." After Vivian said that, she stared at me, her eyes filled with surprise and disbelief. I couldn't help but smile awkwardly. When we parted at Rapid City, she had vaguely expressed her feelings to me. I didn't take it to heart and thought that it was just a child's emotions. I didn't expect that after so many years, she would have to personally verify the identity of a strong, dog-headed man in the faraway King City to be at ease. I obviously couldn't continue this topic. I turned my head to avoid her gaze and changed the topic. "After so many years, how have you been after returning to King City? I see that your strength has increased a lot. Did you find a teacher, or did you enter another school?" Vivian shook her head, and the joy on her face faded. "Our lion race has specialized teachers in the King City. Along with my powerful bloodline, it's normal for my cultivation to increase." Vivian obviously didn't want to talk about such matters. After a simple reply, she hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Actually, the reason why I suddenly left Rapid City and returned to King City was because my father arranged a marriage for me." My brows furrowed. "Marriage? Vivian's father? Isn't your father from the dragon race? Did he arrange a marriage for you to be betrothed to another dragon race?" Hearing what I said, Vivian widened her eyes and shook her head. "My mother is from the dragon race, while my father is from the lion race. The lion race's monster emperor." This time, it was my turn to widen my eyes. Previously, Vivian had expressed her hatred towards the dragon race and had even mentioned her mother. I had subconsciously thought that the reason why she possessed the dragon race's bloodline was because her mother had been raped by the dragon race. Who would have thought that my guess was completely wrong? The Lion Clan's demon, the Arch, clearly referred to Emperor Pu-Er, who ruled the entire demon region. Vivian was actually Emperor Pu-Er's daughter. For some reason, I suddenly thought of Nam. If he knew that he had interacted with the daughter of the great Emperor Prior, he would probably kneel down in fear. My mind was indescribably chaotic. Suddenly, I recalled the rumor that I heard in the pub yesterday. I hastily asked, "I heard that the lion race's princess is going to marry the young monster emperor of the sea race 3 months later. Could it be you?" Vivian's expression instantly darkened. She didn't say anything and only nodded. The young monster emperor of the sea race. When I heard about this person yesterday, I already had the intention to challenge him. Now that I heard about this matter, my fighting spirit inexplicably increased. However, after remaining silent for a moment, I smiled wryly and shook my head. What did this matter have to do with me? Even if I really wanted to challenge the young monster emperor of the sea race, it shouldn't have anything to do with this matter. I remained silent, and Vivian didn't have the intention to speak either. After a long while, she lifted her head and squeezed out a stiff smile. "Duo G, I'm really happy to see you. However, the King City's patrol team is still waiting outside. I can't stay here for too long. If not, I might bring trouble to you. I'll bring my men and leave first. I'll come back here to look for you after a few days." After saying that, Vivian looked at me for a few seconds before she stood up and left. After she left, the spirit snake jumped next to me and said hastily, "This won't do. How can Xiao Wei marry that monster emperor of the sea race? Isn't this the same as a good cabbage being taken by a pig?" I roll my eyes at him. "What does this matter have to do with you? Even if she's taken by a pig, it won't be your turn. Could it be that you're still thinking about her?" The spirit snake glared at me angrily. "Oh, I'm doing this for your sake. I already felt that something wasn't right when we were in Rapid City. Xiao Wei's expression just now couldn't be any more obvious. It's obvious that she's in love with you. You're about to be made a cuckold by the monster emperor of the sea race. Aren't you worried? You're the cuckold. Which eye of yours saw that she's in love with me? Uffed. What's in love? Can you not make it sound so disgusting?" The spirit snake looked at me in disdain. "Just pretend to be confused. Anyway, you're the one who's going to be made a cuckold. not me. I didn't bother with him and stood up. I stretched my body and stood by the window as I looked at the bustling street outside. My heart felt heavy. The spirit snake, who had been quiet for a few minutes, came over again. "You're really not worried?" I slapped his head. "Shut up. Pack up. We're going to go out for a stroll." There was still half a year's time before the last beast awakening ceremony. I planned to stay idle in King City for the next half a year. If I had nothing to do, I'd walk around and experience the customs of the monster race. At the same time, I'd stabilize my cultivation. Seeing that I wasn't moved, the spirit snake could only follow me out resentfully. When I'd strolled around King City the previous day, I'd felt that it was novel. However, after strolling around for half a day, I didn't feel that I had gained anything. Hence, I soaked in the inn for half a day before returning to the inn. I didn't go out for the next few days. I just closed my eyes and adjusted my breathing. I adjusted my state of mind and stabilized my cultivation at the same time. In the past few years, if I wasn't hunting beasts in battle, I'd been swallowing beast cores to increase my power. After a few years, my cultivation had rapidly increased, but my state of mind had fallen behind. If I didn't stabilize my state of mind in time, it would definitely affect the advancement of my cultivation in the future. Many days passed in a row as he adjusted his breathing. Under the slow adjustment, his mental state gradually became much more harmonious and clear. One afternoon, after a few days, Vivian came to the inn again. This time, she didn't lose her composure like the previous time. She also didn't mention her marriage and just chatted with me for half an hour. Afterwards, she said that it was boring staying in the inn, so she invited me to play in the beast hunting grounds. I didn't think much about it and directly rejected her. She and I were people from two different worlds. Moreover, her wedding was imminent. It was inappropriate for a lone woman and a single woman to meet and play at this time. After hearing my rejection, Vivian's expression darkened a little. However, she recovered in the blink of an eye. She didn't say much and continued to chat with me for half an afternoon before leaving. In the following 2 months, Vivian would come to the inn every few days to find me. She didn't ask me to do anything like the first time. She just chatted with me in the inn and occasionally helped me tidy up the room. She even personally cooked for me. Her status was noble, so the word princess seemed to have an otherworldly aura. But in fact, she was very good at tidying up the room, and the food she personally cooked was delicious. It was completely different from what I had imagined. 3 months passed in a flash. In the week before the wedding, Vivian didn't come to the inn at all. I didn't think much of it and just thought that she would be busy as the wedding was approaching. However, I didn't expect that on the night before the wedding, Vivian would suddenly come to the inn again. When I saw Vivian, I was a little surprised. "Why did you come to find me at this time?" She seemed to have drunk a lot of wine as her face was red. Her previous restraint in front of me was completely gone. She didn't answer my question and just giggled at me. Guess. Of course, I couldn't guess her goal. I just frowned and advised her, "You shouldn't be drunk at this time." Vivian rolled her eyes at me and didn't say anything. She lifted her foot and walked into the room. After a few steps, she suddenly turned around and slammed the door with her foot. Then, she walked to my bed and sat down. She raised her head to look at me and giggled. "I'm staying here tonight. I won't be leaving." Chapter 976. While I was flabbergasted, Vivian rolled her eyes at me and repeated herself with emphasis. I said that I won't be leaving tonight. I'll stay here. As she said that, she kicked her shoes off, revealing her small feet before jumping onto my bed. The inn that I was staying in was one of the best inns in King City, but it didn't have the soft spring mattress that the human world had. Thus, Vivian didn't jump on the bed, but laid down instead. She hooked her finger at me and said domineeringly, "Come over and sleep with me." At this moment, I had already recovered from my shock. I walked over to the bed and sat down. I smiled at Vivian and asked, "Are you intending to give your body to me before the wedding?" The drunk Vivian didn't have the slightest bit of embarrassment. She looked at me and nodded. That's right. I didn't know that this lass had such a fiery temperament. However, I still shook my head. I might not have told you before, but I already have a wife in my hometown. Moreover, our customs are different. A husband can only marry one wife. Vivian's gaze was a little dazed as she muttered, "You dog-head men have such customs. But it doesn't matter. I didn't ask you to marry me." I sighed. "Why do you have to do this?" I didn't know why, but Vivian seemed to suddenly get angry. She jumped up and knelt on the bed. She lowered her head and said to me, "Could it be that you aren't willing? Our monster race's virgin corolla contains innate power. I have the bloodline of the lion race and dragon race. My virgin corolla contains a trace of heaven and earth's power. Anyone who obtains my virgin corolla will have their cultivation increase by 1 realm. Even the sea race's monster emperor covets it. Could it be that you aren't interested in it?" I was stunned after hearing that. The person who obtains Vivian's virgin corolla will have their cultivation increase by 1 realm. The sea race's monster emperor wants to marry her because of that. Seeing that I didn't make a sound for a long time, Vivian leaned on my shoulder again. She was angry just now, but now she looked at me coquettishly and whispered, "How is it? Are you moved?" At this moment, I didn't have the time to be moved. I just didn't understand. The virgin corolla probably referred to her virgin body, which contained some kind of spiritual power. This was not difficult to understand. After all, Taoism also had the plucking technique, and in the demonic realm, the spiritual power far surpassed that of the human world, so this situation was not surprising. What I really didn't understand was that anyone who obtained her virgin corolla would be able to increase their cultivation by 1 realm. If the sea race's monster emperor obtains your virgin flower crown, will his cultivation increase by 1 realm? I asked. Vivian nodded. Origin energy is something that even a demon the arch yearns for. The sea race's demon the arch. He can't be considered a demon the arch yet. His cultivation is still a step away from becoming a demon the arch. However, after obtaining my virgin corolla, he will become a true demon the arch. That's why the sea race threatened my father and forced me to marry him. In that case, the so-called young demon emperor of the sea race actually has the same cultivation as me. If Vivian's virgin corolla can make him a true demon emperor, then it can also make me a demon emperor. With my many years of cultivation, I would be deceiving myself if I said that I wasn't moved by this opportunity that could allow me to ascend to the heavens in a single bound. However, if I accepted Vivian, how could I face Tao Wu? How could I face myself? Beads of sweat appeared on my forehead, and my mouth felt dry. I swallowed my saliva. I couldn't make a decision and could only change the topic. I asked Vivian, "Your father is Emperor Pu, and your mother is from the dragon race. What right does the sea race have to threaten your father and force you to marry him?" Perhaps it was because I mentioned something sad. Wei Weian's eyes dimmed. She moved away from me a little before replying with some resentment. The dragon race is only the protector of the monster domain and won't participate in other matters. After the gate to the mountain and sea realm opened, my father had no choice but to use me as a bargaining chip in exchange for the sea race's loyalty. I didn't understand. If that's the case, why did you give me your virgin corolla? What if the sea race goes back on their word? Vivian shook her head. Although the sea race's monster emperor's goal is my virgin corolla, he won't openly mention it. Moreover, the sea race's monster emperor has already sworn that as long as we are engaged, he will listen to my father's orders. Under such circumstances, even if he can't obtain my virgin corolla, he won't dare to go back on his word. It's not just my father, the other monster emperors in the dragon race won't allow such a thing to happen. After saying that, she was silent for a moment before continuing. In reality, the sea race doesn't have the capital to rebel. They just want some benefits. The dragon race and the other monster emperors have tacitly agreed to this. As for my father, he probably thinks that I can be sacrificed. Vivian's expression was downcast. As she spoke, she bitterly smiled. When I angrily went to question my father, do you know what he said? He told me that if I didn't want to marry the sea race's monster emperor, I could go find someone I like. As long as my sweetheart follows the customs of the demonic realm and defeats the groom during the wedding, he wouldn't stop me. In the demonic realm, there are only a few monster emperors. Where am I going to find someone who can defeat him? Even if I can find someone, the person with such a cultivation would be older than my father. What difference does it make who I marry? I furrowed my brows slightly, then smiled bitterly. From Vivian's words, it seemed that I was the only suitable person. Vivian didn't continue on this topic. Instead, she leaned on me and continued with a trembling voice. I heard that the sea race's people are extremely ugly and are violent and bloodthirsty. Especially the raging shark race. They're the most tyrannical. I heard that the raging shark race's prince, who wanted to marry me, had once massacred an entire city of the sea race in a single night. He didn't even let the women and children off. How can I marry such a person? How can I marry such a person? As she said that, she started to sob. I sighed and extended my hand to hold her shoulder. I gently pressed on her neck, and a surge of monster aura surged into her, causing her to faint. Then, I supported her limp body and carefully laid her down on the bed. Then, I covered her with a blanket. After temporarily settling Vivian down, I stood up from the bed. The door to the room was pushed open with a bang. The spirit snake hurriedly barged in. Ever since Vivian had come to the inn to look for me 3 months ago, the snake spirit had rented another room to live separately from me. After entering the room, the snake spirit glanced at Vivian, who was sleeping on the bed. He quickly said to me, "You can't agree to marry her." I glared at him angrily. "Why aren't you sleeping? Why are you eavesdropping on me? Did you hear our conversation just now?" The snake spirit nodded. "If I hadn't eavesdropped on you, you would have fallen into her trap. This Xiaowei is here tonight to trick you into taking the bait. How could there be such a coincidence that everything she said fits perfectly with you?" I looked at the snake spirit in surprise. This brat was usually muddle-headed. I didn't expect him to be so vigilant. Actually, the snake spirit was right. Vivian's words were obviously hinting at me. She had thrown out a temptation that I couldn't refuse, then eliminated my worries. She had even helped me find the most suitable and perfect solution. The most important evidence was that Vivian had the cultivation of a monster saint. How could she be drunk? Back then, before I had reached the Sky Master realm, I wouldn't be fooled. Hence, when Vivian had said those words to me, I had already been vigilant. This was also the reason why I had made Vivian fall asleep. As for the snake spirit's words, it wasn't to the extent of deceiving me. What Vivian had said was an overt plot. Hence, everything she had said was true. Otherwise, she wouldn't have used such a lame method of pretending to be drunk. The only thing I was curious about was that she could see through my cultivation. All these years, I have traveled almost the entire demon territory. Although I didn't have any direct contact with the demon Arch, I did move around under the demon Thearcha's eyes. I never exposed my identity and cultivation. How could Vivian see through my cultivation? I couldn't figure out, even after thinking about it for a long time. I didn't want to think too much about it. I decided to wake Vivian up and ask her directly. However, I had to make a decision before waking her up. Chapter 977. When Vivian suggested staying the night, I didn't think much and rejected her. But now, faced with such a huge temptation, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Apart from my own selfish desires, I had personally witnessed the strength of the monster race in the past few years. If the current situation were to continue, the human race would be unable to withstand a single blow in the future war. If I could successfully advance to Xiaju and obtain the help of the 4 vicious beasts, the human race would have the power to fight in the future war. Although there were many signs that the impending war was the result of the manipulation of the ancient gods, such as Monster Emperor Feng and Emperor Yanhuang, I didn't know their motives, nor did I know the final direction of the war. I could only choose based on my own conscience. I pondered in silence for a long time. When the sky started to brighten, I chased the snake's spirit out and woke Vivian up. After opening her eyes, Vivian was in a daze for a moment. Then, she recalled what had happened earlier. Her eyes seemed to be avoiding my gaze. "What time is it now? Why did I fall asleep?" I smiled and replied, "It's almost daybreak. As for you falling asleep, it was obviously because I made you fall asleep. Don't misunderstand. It's because the temptation you gave me was too great. If I don't think about it calmly, I wouldn't know what to do." Vivian was stunned for a moment before she sat up and hugged her legs with her arms curled up. It was obvious that after I said it out loud, she didn't have any intentions of seducing me. She tilted her head and looked at me for a while before sighing, "OG, you're really different from the other kobolds." I laughed. Of course, other kobolds aren't as amazing as me. Also, when you made your decision today, didn't you consider my identity? A normal kobold wouldn't be able to raise their cultivation so quickly like me. Vivian shook her head. I don't have a choice. What's the point of thinking about these questions? I was speechless. I had to say that she was an extremely intelligent girl and had thought through everything. After a moment of silence, I continued, "Even though you aren't interested in knowing, there are some things that I have to tell you. I didn't lie to you previously. I already have a wife in my hometown, and we are loyal to each other. I don't have any other thoughts in my life. That's why I can't accept a relationship. I can only accept a deal." I hastened my speech and told her my plans. "Just as you said, I will defeat the sea race's monster emperor and fight for your marriage. I'll leave the monster region after 3 months. Before that, it's up to you to decide if you want to get married or not. Other than these, if there are any other ways to make up for it, just tell me. As long as it's within my means, I'll do it." After saying that in one breath, I stopped. Vivian continued to lower her head. After a few minutes of silence, Vivian finally raised her head to look at me. Her face was expressionless as she asked, "Is this the only way?" I nodded. "That's the only way." This time, Vivian didn't remain silent. Instead, she smiled and sat up from the bed. She hugged my shoulder and whispered into my ear, "You don't have to blame yourself because I didn't ask for much. It's a deal. I'll wait for your good news." Upon saying that, Vivian let go of my shoulder and jumped off the bed. She seemed to have recovered her cheerful appearance. After putting on her shoes, she waved at me before jogging off. After Vivian left, I stood silently in the room for a long while. Only after the sky had brightened did I pack up. I didn't inform the spirit snake and left the inn. Vivian and the sea race's monster emperor's wedding was the biggest event in King City during this period of time. Everyone knew that the wedding venue was at the intersection of the inner city and outer city. Normally, the royal family's wedding would be held in the inner city. However, this wedding was different. All of the citizens of King City would attend the ceremony. That was why they had specially chosen this location. When I had arrived at King City, a huge balcony had already been set up and everything had been prepared. According to the monster race's customs, the groom had to stay at the wedding venue the day before the wedding to welcome any challenges that might come. In a monster region where the strong preyed on the weak, the strong had all the rights. As long as they could defeat the bride, they could replace the groom and become the main character of the wedding. Because of this custom, every wedding in the demon region would attract the attention of many onlookers. From the day before the wedding, the onlookers would gather early in the morning, waiting for the bride-snatching drama to unfold one after another. However, when I reached the balcony where the wedding would be held, I didn't see many spectators. It wasn't that the citizens of King City didn't like to watch a commotion, but the sea race's monster emperor's cultivation was really strong. There wouldn't be anyone who would snatch the bride. Thus, before the wedding officially started, there wouldn't be anyone guarding there. I glanced at the balcony from afar. There wasn't anyone on the balcony, but there were many people bustling about in the wooden house at the end of the balcony. The sea race's monster emperor should be in the wooden house. I had absolute confidence that I could defeat the sea race's monster emperor since we were both in the same realm. However, I had to make some preparations before the battle. Firstly, I had to hide my identity. The sea race's monster emperor was in the same realm as me, so he wouldn't be able to see through my disguise. However, this battle would definitely attract Emperor Pooh's attention. With my current cultivation, I wouldn't be able to resist his prying eyes. This problem wasn't difficult to solve. After my powers had recovered, the god's power in my body had also completely recovered. I only needed to circulate the god's power throughout my body. Not to mention Emperor Pooh. Even if all the monster emperors gathered in the monster region gathered, they wouldn't be able to see through my disguise as long as their cultivation wasn't higher than the monster emperor. Apart from my identity, I had to prepare a story about my background. After all, Anyone would be suspicious if I couldn't explain the background of a young man who was close to the Monster Emperor. Previously in Rock City, I used the story of the dragon race's bloodline. However, this story obviously wouldn't work now. Monster Emperor Pooh had a close relationship with the dragon race. If they were to investigate, I wouldn't be able to justify myself. Since I couldn't use the tiger skin of the dragon race, I could only find a bigger tiger skin to use. Without much thought, I thought about the black tortoise that I had met on the Rua Shui River. With my cultivation, I couldn't determine how high the black tortoise's cultivation was. However, I was certain that it was much higher than the average Monster Emperor's. Moreover, I had never heard of anyone discussing the existence of the divine beast in the monster region. I was almost certain that the black tortoise was extremely low-key and didn't even appear in the monster region. No matter how I looked at it, the black tortoise was the best candidate to use the tiger skin. As for the previous story of the dragon race's bloodline, I wasn't worried that others would doubt it. After all, I was a dog-headed man with poor aptitude. It was normal for the black tortoise to adjust my bloodline. After adjusting all these flaws, I took out a few Earth-grade beast cores from Xiang Lu's pouch. These were the high-grade beast cores that I had hunted from the monster god's ferocious beasts. They contained surging demonic power. Swallowing these beast cores wouldn't increase my cultivation anymore. However, it was still possible for me to retain the demonic power in my body for a short period of time. In the battle with the Monster Emperor of the Sea Race, I would rely on the additional demonic power to increase my advantage. Even a lion would use its full strength to capture a rabbit. With my cultivation, the additional demonic power, and the existence of the god's power, there wouldn't be any accidents in this battle. After preparing everything, I exerted strength in my legs and leaped onto the balcony. At this moment, there wasn't anyone on the balcony, but there was a large cowhide drum in the middle of the ground. This drum was called the bride snatching drum. Once the drum sounded, the bride snatching would begin. In front of the monster race's rules that had been passed down from generation to generation, everyone had to abide by it. The Monster Emperor was no exception. There were drumsticks hanging beside the bride snatching drum, but I didn't use them at all. I used my palms to strike the surface of the drum, causing a low and heavy sound to be heard. The sound wasn't loud at the start, but under the continuous strikes of my palms, the sound continued to spread, and soon the entire monarch city was roused. Chapter 978. Who's the bride snatching drum? Is he crazy? There's someone snatching the Monster Emperor's wife? That's Princess Vivian. If I could defeat the Monster Emperor, I'll snatch her too. Even when the stream of people appeared on the balcony, I could still hear the crowd's discussions from the boiling cauldron of voices. But when these citizens of the royal city came closer and saw the situation on the balcony, they all fell silent at the same time. Everyone stared at me with widened eyes, their mouths gaping so wide that a goose egg could fit inside. After a short moment of silence, there was a huge commotion. Dog-headed man? How is that possible? That dog-headed man must be crazy. He must be. I thought that someone would be able to save Princess Vivian from the demonic clutches of the sea race. It seems like I made a wasted trip. How unlucky. Everyone discussed, and their opinions were the same. No one had confidence in me, the dog-headed man. I naturally didn't have the time to care about the people watching the show. My gaze was focused on the tall wooden house in front of me. At that moment, two sea race members in warrior attire walked out from the wooden house. However, from their auras, they obviously weren't the Monster Emperor. How dare you, dog-headed man? How dare you cause trouble here? After the tall sea race warriors saw my appearance, they treated me as the troublemaker. As they scolded, they pounced towards me. I smiled faintly and didn't move. My monster power surged out from my body. When the two of them flew into the air, they were forced back by my monster power and fell back to their previous positions. They stared at me with their eyes wide and mouths agape. As I revealed my cultivation, a burly man, whose body was filled with surging demonic power, suddenly stepped out from the wooden house. He was about 3 meters tall, with a bald head and a broad brain. He had a robust body. This was obviously the young sea race Monster Emperor. Although his appearance was different from normal people, he looked dignified on the whole. He wasn't as ugly and ferocious as I had imagined. After he stood on the balcony, he stared at me for a moment as though he was measuring my power. A few seconds later, he said in a loud voice, "Bride snatching?" I nodded. "Bride kidnapping." The Sea Clan demon, the Arch, didn't waste any more time. After confirming, he crossed his fists on his chest. Demonic aura rolled around him. Under his bronze-colored skin, his muscles and bones expanded at the same time. Almost in an instant, his body doubled in height and became a towering giant like a mountain. Even the demonic power around him doubled. Looking at his appearance, I was slightly apprehensive. It wasn't rare for a body to grow in size, but at the same time, his monster power cultivation also increased, which was extremely unusual. Fortunately, I just used the heaven-swallowing secret art to swallow a few Earth-level beast cores. Otherwise, I would have been in a passive position from the start. The Sea Race's Monster Emperor's cultivation was the same as mine. However, after using such a technique to increase his monster power, he was certain that he would be able to suppress me in terms of monster power. Thus, he walked towards me. When he got close to me, he didn't make any fancy movements. He clenched his right fist and threw a punch at me. Surging monster power wrapped around his fist. With a quick movement, the monster power formed a huge whirlpool around his fist, as though a tornado was violently attacking me. I stood at the same spot and chose the exact same movement as him. I threw a punch. The surging monster power wasn't inferior to his at all. Even a monster power tornado around my fist was the same as his. He wanted to fight me head-on, so I followed his wishes. Even though the technique to increase monster power by one-fold was magical, the extra monster power was like a rootless duckweed. I didn't believe that he could use it a second time. On the other hand, the monster power that I swallowed came from the beast cores. After using the heaven-swallowing secret art, I could swallow another 2 beast cores. If this continued, I would be in an invincible position. In the blink of an eye, the 2 monster power tornadoes collided with each other. There wasn't any sound. After the 2 monster powers collided, they annihilated each other. Only the monster power that dissipated from the edges scattered on the ground of the balcony, stirring up a long dust cloud. I didn't use any monster power in my body for this attack, but I had already used up half of the monster power that I had swallowed from the beast cores. On the other side, the Sea Race's Monster Emperor looked as though he still had abundant monster power, but his expression wasn't good. It was obvious that he knew that I had the same technique to increase my monster power. He reacted quickly and didn't continue to fight me head-on. Instead, he heavily patted his chest with both of his hands. Immediately after, a large amount of liquid poured out from his pores and flowed to his feet, forming a puddle of water. Moreover, it constantly spread outwards, covering half of the balcony in a flash. The puddle of water only stopped expanding when it reached the edge of the balcony. There was still a large amount of water droplets flowing down from the Sea Race's Monster Emperor's body. The area of the puddle of water didn't expand anymore, but the depth continued to increase. Only when the lower half of the Sea Race's Monster Emperor's body was completely submerged did the pores on his body finally close and no more water droplets dripped down. At that moment, the position where I was standing was forced in front of me by the puddle of water. I could only try my best to disperse the monster power in my body to barely stop the puddle of water from spreading further. I was extremely shocked. When I saw the puddle of water, I didn't recognize what technique it was. However, when I saw the Sea Race's Monster Emperor that was submerged in the water, I had an answer in my heart. In the second half of the Death Scripture, there was a detailed description of the Shiji realm. When one's cultivation reached this realm, one would no longer be immortal and could be called a deity. Regardless of whether it was in the various Taoist scriptures or folklore, the greatest characteristic of the deities was that their will could penetrate through the heavens and earth. With a single thought, they could create and destroy everything in the world. In reality, even the Shiju immortals couldn't control everything in the world. However, the Shiju immortals could form a domain around their bodies. The size of the domain would be different depending on their cultivation. Within this domain, the Shiju immortals could control everything. At that moment, the sea race's monster emperor's body was surrounded by a vast body of water. It was his domain. It was no wonder that this person dared to call himself a monster emperor, even though his cultivation hadn't reached the monster emperor realm. It turned out that he had already comprehended the monster emperor's greatest divine power. Even though my cultivation was the same as his, and we were both at the half-step Shiju realm, he was undoubtedly one step ahead of me in this divine power. If I were to face a real Shiju immortal, I wouldn't be able to resist his domain with just my own monster power and would definitely be engulfed in it. However, when the sea race's monster emperor's domain spread out, I could barely resist it with my monster power. From this point of view, the sea race's domain that he was emitting was far from the real monster emperor's domain. After I calmed down from the shock, I was slightly excited. No matter what the outcome of this battle was, being able to personally witness the monster emperor's domain would be greatly beneficial to my future cultivation. Perhaps, I might even be able to comprehend my own domain after this battle. While I was excited, the sea race's monster emperor was already walking towards me. As he moved, the puddle of water that surrounded him surged towards me. During the clash of force with force, my monster power wasn't inferior to his at all. However, when facing his monster emperor's domain, even if I were to activate all the monster power in my body, it would still be difficult for me to resist it. I was being suppressed by him as I retreated step by step. The balcony for the wedding was huge, but the sea race's domain had already occupied more than half of the balcony. After retreating a few steps, I reached the edge of the balcony. According to the customs of the monster region, once I was forced off the balcony, the challenge to snatch the bride would be considered a failure. I stood still at the edge of the balcony. At that moment, the monster emperor's domain was getting closer and closer. It was already less than a meter away from me. I took a deep breath and clasped my palms together. The god's power that I had already activated surged out from my fingertips and formed a golden light sword. I slashed at the monster emperor's domain that was getting closer. The monster emperor's domain suppressed my monster power. Hence, even if my monster power was in the lead, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. However, after the appearance of the god's power, the situation was immediately reversed. Against the monster emperor's god's power, the monster emperor's domain was the one being suppressed. After the golden light sword slashed down, the monster emperor's domain was instantly slashed open. Chapter 979. Under the suppression of energy levels, the monster emperor's domain was as weak as tofu in front of the power of a god. After the two swords broke through the monster emperor's domain, the sea race's monster emperor didn't move. I didn't take advantage of the situation to attack. I just stood there, looking at him from afar. You can comprehend the monster emperor's domain. You're only half a step away from the monster emperor realm. Why do you insist on marrying Vivian? This time, he didn't treat his words like gold. Instead, a mocking smile appeared on his face. His body returned to its original form. You can comprehend the monster emperor's domain. You're also half a step away. Why do you still ask me? If you can't take that step, then half a step is like a heavenly moat. He wasn't wrong. At our cultivation realm, advancing even a little bit isn't something that can be achieved through hard work or the accumulation of time. It all depends on fate. For example, the old president of the human realm, Celestial Master Zhang, and the others didn't even have the slightest chance of success. They could only place all their hopes on opening the mountain and sea realm. If they knew about Vivian's ability, they probably wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice their lives for her. Seeing that I didn't respond, the young sea race's monster emperor continued. You can use the monster emperor's power. Wu Huan isn't your match. In this battle, he seemed to want to admit defeat, but before he could finish, a cold shout came from afar. Wu Huan, shut up. I looked up. In the sky above the inner city, two figures were flying over. As the voice faded, the two figures were already standing on the balcony. The person on the left wore a golden robe and a golden crown. His body exuded a powerful and imposing demonic aura. whether it was his robe or his cultivation base. It was obvious that this person was Monster Emperor Pu, who Namu had knelt to when he was far away. The shout just now hadn't come from him, but from a black-robed old man standing next to him. Seeing this person's face, my heart trembled and I was momentarily dazed. I've seen this person before. Not long after the mountain and sea realm opened, the Sioux clan was besieged by the demon folk. When I went to help them, I saw a black-robed demon folk who looked exactly like this black-robed old man standing next to Demon Emperor Prior. Back then, in the Sioux family, the evil spirit rushed over and forced the black-robed old man back. From the situation, he should only be half a step into the Shaji realm. But now that I look closely, I can't see through his cultivation at all. I feel like I am facing an endless ocean. This means that he is also a monster emperor. Although he didn't understand why his power had changed so much, he did mention his name when he was defeated by the evil sacrificial spirit, Wu Juzui. As for the Yangtze race demon emperor, his name was Wu Huan. From all the signs, this black-robed elder Wu Juzui should be Wu Huan's father, the true demon emperor of the Sea clan. As I was shaken, Wu Juzui stared at me and didn't say anything. Instead, Emperor Prior spoke. "Brother Wu, we've been watching the battle for a long time. Wu Huan really isn't his match. Why did you?" I could see that what Vivian had said earlier was correct. Emperor Prior didn't want to be threatened by the Sea clan. He immediately spoke up to protect me. Hearing that, Wu Juzui shook his head. His malicious eyes continued to stare at me. Ignoring Emperor Prior's words, he asked me, "Brat, who are you?" "This one is Duo G, a member of the Doghead race." I first bowed before replying leisurely. With the god's power, even if Wu Juzui was a monster emperor, he couldn't see through my disguise. Thus, I didn't panic and maintained a calm and natural expression. "Doghead? Duo G." Wu Juzui's gaze became increasingly aggressive. He took a step forward and continued. "Why do I feel that you're from the human race? Your name isn't Duo G, but Zhou E. If I was caught off guard and my identity was exposed, I would definitely show some panic. However, before Wu Juzui spoke, I had already prepared myself. Thus, my expression didn't change at all, only revealing a face of doubt. Before I could ask, Emperor Prior spoke first. "Brother Wu, why do you say that?" Wu Juzui's gaze finally moved away from me. He turned to Emperor Prior and replied, "The power that person used wasn't the monster emperor's power, but the god's power. You'll be able to sense it if you carefully sense it." Hearing this, I instantly recalled that Wu Juzui had previously called out the power of gods and the power of the monster emperor at the Sioux family's manor. It was just that I didn't know much about these two powers and didn't understand the difference until now. My heart couldn't help but sink when he suddenly mentioned it. Emperor Prior frowned when he heard that. He stared at me attentively for a moment. There seemed to be a layer of golden energy that instantly charged in front of me. I didn't have a chance to react as it circled around my body before rapidly leaving. "It really is the god's power. Who are you?" Emperor Prior's expression became vigilant. At that moment, I was unable to remain calm. The two people in front of me both had the cultivation of a monster emperor. If they were to attack me, I wouldn't even have the chance to escape. What should I do? My thoughts raced. God power. Monster Emperor's power. Since Emperor Prior had mistaken it, it meant that there wasn't much of a difference between the two. From my perspective, both of them were extremely strong powers. Moreover, the appearance that they displayed was golden energy. From the literal meaning, the god's power was the god's power, and the monster emperor's power was the monster emperor's power. Could it be that the god's power referred to the human world's Xiaju's power, while the monster emperor's power referred to the monster emperor's power in the monster domain? Just like Tao energy and monster power, the two were powers of the same realm, but the source of the power was different. In an instant, I had an idea. I maintained my calm appearance and bowed towards Emperor Prior before replying unhurriedly. "This one is from the Doghead race, Duo G. I've already replied to you. As for the power that I used, you are correct. It is the god's power." Hearing my words, Emperor Prior and Wu Juzui were slightly startled. I didn't wait for them to ask again as I continued. This god's power was intentionally left in my body by my master. He once said that the god's power was no different from the monster emperor's power. As long as I carefully sense it and understand its true essence, I will be able to advance to the monster emperor rank. Speaking of which, I had used the god's power to defeat Brother Wu Huan. It was indeed an unfair victory. Before starting this challenge, I had already thought of making the divine beast, the black tortoise, whom I had met by chance, my teacher. Since I had such a mysterious and powerful teacher, I could naturally push the god's power onto him. Anyway, with the black tortoise's appearance, Emperor Prior and Wu Juzui most likely wouldn't have the chance to talk to him. As expected, after I finished speaking, Emperor Prior immediately asked, "Your master?" Wu Juzui followed up with another question. "You left the god's power in your body. I've never heard of anyone with such an ability in the vast monster region. Brat, who is your master?" It was obvious that Wu Juzui didn't believe my words. I smiled and didn't explain myself. "I've been cultivating with my master since I was young. I've been drifting on the Weakwater Lake. Speaking of which, my master has some history with your sea race. Has the monster emperor really never heard of my master's name?" Wu Juzui's eyebrows locked even tighter. He remained silent for a long while. Instead, Emperor Prior suddenly asked, "What race is your master from?" I was waiting for this question. I was elated and hastily replied, "My master is an ancient person with a long lifespan. He might have existed even before the monster region was born. From the perspective of race, he should belong to the turtle race." I tried to be as vague as possible, but it was impossible for them not to guess my identity. After I finished speaking, the two of us looked at each other. The suspicion in Wu Juzui's eyes finally lessened. However, he still didn't give up and continued to ask, "May I know where your master is now?" "Master has the same lifespan as the heavens and earth. He's a true immortal god. When I left him a few years ago, he disappeared without a trace. I don't know where he is now. However, he loves water and most likely won't leave the water region. The monster emperor is the ruler of the sea race. Perhaps you'll be able to find my master after you patrol the sea region." Chapter 980. To tell you the truth, I met your master once 100 years ago. I was still young then and was chased to a lone island on the Weakwater Lake where I met the Black Tortoise Supreme. It was all because of him that I managed to escape with my life. Afterwards, he even gave me pointers on my cultivation, allowing me to have my current cultivation. Since you are the disciple of the Black Tortoise Supreme, with his powers, it is normal for him to leave behind a divine power in your body to aid you in comprehending a higher level of power. Wu Juzui's face was filled with reminiscence as he talked about his past. At the same time, he cleared all suspicions on me. While I heaved a sigh of relief, I was rather jealous. Why didn't I encounter such a good thing when I met the Black Tortoise at the Weakwater Lake? I didn't know why the old turtle, the Black Tortoise, had taken a liking to Wu Juzui. However, it was also because of his experience that he completely believed my nonsense. After all, not everyone knew that the Black Tortoise had transformed into a lone island. With such an inexplicable relationship, Wu Juzui's gaze towards me became much gentler and even felt a sense of closeness. On the other hand, Emperor Pu'er, who was at the side, was silent. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I reckoned that he had other thoughts towards the old turtle, the Black Tortoise. At this moment, Wu Huan spoke again. He cupped his fist towards me. "Brother Duo Ji, I'm not your match in this battle. The Lion Race Princess is naturally yours. Even without the Lion Race Princess's virgin corolla, I'll advance to the Monster Emperor rank in the near future. We'll compete then." The brow was about to admit defeat, but was stopped by Wu Juzui. He only spoke now. It was obvious that he was extremely confident that he could advance to the Monster Emperor rank with his own power. He didn't seem to care about Vivian's virgin corolla at all. He had the vigor of a young man. I smiled and cupped my fists. "Brother Wu, thank you for your help." Wu Huan directly retreated, and Wu Juzui didn't continue to pester him. Emperor Pu'er was naturally happy to see that happen. He said to me, with a gentle expression, Since that's the case, follow me back to the palace to meet my daughter. Although you and I have full authority over the engagement, my daughter has been spoiled since she was a child. Before the wedding tomorrow, it will be beneficial for both of you to get to know each other first. It seemed that he still didn't know about my relationship with Wei Weian. I cupped my hands towards him and said, Lord Monster Emperor, a few years ago, when I was in the northern province's Rock City, I was already acquainted with Wei Weian. We had quite a bit of friendship between us. Today, I took the liberty to challenge Brother Wu. According to the rules of our demon region, before the marriage, we have to finish the whole day of snatching the bride and guarding the arena. Today, I will not enter the palace to disturb you. I will continue to guard the arena for the whole day. After the wedding, I will enter the palace with Vivian to pay my respects to you. Prior's words carried a hint of intimacy. Most likely, he wanted to dig out some information about the black tortoise from me. However, I had only come for Vivian. Settling the wedding as soon as possible was the most important matter. My rejection didn't make Prior angry. Instead, he had a joyful expression as he teased Wu Juzui. This fellow is really impatient. All right, us two old men shouldn't stay here to spoil the wedding. Let's go and rest. Upon saying that, he and Wu Juzui laughed as they left. Wu Huan followed after them, leaving me alone on the balcony. Below the balcony, there were more and more citizens of King's City gathering to watch the commotion. Most of their faces were flushed with excitement and shock. It was obvious that they hadn't expected the outcome and were excitedly discussing it. Very quickly, a few maids walked over and brought me to the wooden house in front of rest. Similar to the previous Wu Huan, this so-called snatching bride challenge was actually just a formality. It was obvious that there wouldn't be any more challengers after this. As long as they endured through the day, they would be able to proceed with the wedding. In the afternoon, the time for guarding the arena had yet to end. However, there were already a few hundred palace guards that had arrived and started to set up the balcony. In a short while, countless fiery red flowers and candlesticks had completely transformed the originally empty balcony. After the decorations were done, Vivian also came to the wooden house. At that moment, she was wearing a complicated golden robe. It was obvious that it was a wedding dress. After seeing me, her face blushed slightly. However, she couldn't hide the joy on her face. She stared at me for a moment before lowering her head shyly. She asked me softly, "Duo-G, what is the wedding dress of your Houndhead tribe? I forgot to prepare it previously. I'll get someone to make a set as soon as possible. There should still be time." A Houndhead tribe's dress. I instantly remembered the huge iron hoop hanging from Nam's crotch. I felt a chill down my spine and hurriedly shook my head. It's okay, it's okay. A Houndhead tribe's wedding isn't so particular. I'll just I'll wear your Lion tribe dress. I originally wanted to say that I'd wear a casual dress, but after thinking about it, this was Vivian's wedding after all. Even if it was an act, I had to make it as perfect as possible so that she wouldn't have any regrets. Very quickly, a maid brought over the Lion tribe's dress and helped me change into it. Compared to the Houndhead tribe's dress, the Lion tribe's dress was much more elegant and luxurious. The men's dress was also golden in color, but it wasn't as complicated as Vivian's women's dress. Overall, it looked like a light and close-fitting armor. Wearing it on my body, even with my current appearance of a Houndhead man, I still looked valiant. Unlike the wedding in the human world, the wedding of all the races in the monster realm was a grand celebration. That was why they chose to hold the wedding at dusk. This was in line with the original meaning of the word wedding. When it was dusk, almost everyone in the capital had gathered around the balcony. The butter candles that were scattered around the balcony were all lit up, illuminating the surroundings. Countless palace guards carried all sorts of food and wine to the crowd, causing waves of cheers. On the balcony, Emperor Prior and Wu Juzui arrived once again. Vivian and I also stood in the middle of the balcony. The wedding process in a monster realm was different. Under Emperor Prior's lead, we first worshipped the ancestors and requested for the Lion tribe and Houndhead tribe's ancestors to bless us. The sacrifices were very extravagant, making me feel emotional. I didn't know if the Hound Head tribe's ancestors had ever enjoyed such extravagant sacrifices. If the village chief of Greenwater Village, Bill, could see this scene, he would definitely be very happy. After the sacrifice, the rest of the process was much simpler. Emperor Prior wrote the marriage contract by hand and burned a copy for the ancestors. He kept a copy for us. Then he brought 2 bowls of wine and asked us to drip a drop of the blood from our palms into the wine bowl. Then we drank the wine and the wedding ceremony was completed. I frowned slightly. Even though I wanted to put on a good show, I still found it hard to accept such a ritualistic act. After hesitating for a moment, I drank the wine mixed with Vivian's blood. However, I didn't swallow it. Once it reached my mouth, I found a chance to use my monster energy to evaporate it. After the simple ceremony, it was time for revelry. There were countless bonfires and countless delicacies and wine. All of the citizens of the capital were intoxicated. Even the palace guards and maids who had been busy previously joined in. There was no one to restrain them. As far as the eye could see, everyone started to sing drunkenly. Prior and Wu Juzui were nowhere to be seen. Vivian pulled me and pointed at the inner city behind the balcony. There was a palace that wasn't far from here. It was obvious that it was our bridal chamber for the night. After busying myself for an entire day, it was all for this moment of spring. However, my heart felt heavy, and I sighed faintly. Only then did I follow Vivian to the palace. The night passed in the blink of an eye. Before the sun had even risen the next day, I had already left the palace in the inner city. I rushed to the Ruo Shui Lake, which was extremely far away from the capital. Vivian's virgin flower crown could indeed increase one's cultivation by 1 rank. However, the increase wasn't instantaneous. It was more like a pill that had been swallowed into the body. Only after the pill had dissolved would the effects be released. Of course, the time it took for the pill to dissolve wasn't very long. I hurriedly arrived at the Ruo Shui Lake. I felt that the accumulated power in my body had reached a critical point. Chapter 981. After cultivating for 1,000 years, one would become a celestial overnight. To a cultivator, becoming a celestial master was considered as entering the next level, and ascending was the ultimate dream. According to the legends, when ascending to heaven, there would be music and celestial music. The southern heavenly gate would open, and the celestial deities of the kingdom of heaven would come out to receive us. Golden boys and jade maidens would serve us, and we would enter the grand, overarching heaven, Jade Capital Mountain, and enjoy endless bliss. No matter how I looked at it, ascending was a joyous process, but it wasn't what I felt at that moment. From the moment I closed my eyes, the power circulating in my body seemed to have instantly turned into a ball of gas, and this gas kept expanding until it filled my limbs and bones. In my consciousness, I was like a balloon that was constantly being filled with gas. It had already expanded to its limit, but there were no signs of it stopping. Every part of his body was being torn apart, and after the burning pain reached a critical point, he felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. However, it did not alleviate much, and the endless burning pain would attack him again and again, in an endless cycle. I was immersed in this feeling, and after an unknown amount of time, my body felt so full that it started to sway, as though I had really become a huge ball. The pain and burning pain disappeared, and only a comfortable and light feeling was left. I opened my eyes, and the world was still vast, with a hint of white at the edge of the sky. It seemed that only an instant had passed since I closed my eyes. I looked around, and the dusk was dim. I couldn't see the surface of the Roshue Lake and could only see the fog. That was when I realized that something was wrong. I wasn't on the Roshue Lake, but in the clouds. My body was still light, as though I didn't feel anything. I flew with the night wind, and the surrounding fog passed by my body and under my feet without any resistance. As I unconsciously flew, the sky seemed to have frozen at the border between night and dawn. I lowered my head and looked down. The mountains and forests were covered in a layer of twilight. The lakes and seas were also covered in black water. Occasionally, I could see a dim yellow light that shone on a few silhouettes around the light. They looked like a few lonely souls in the eternal night. At first, the figures I saw were all strangers. They were like clay statues, sitting there without any movement. But gradually, the figures began to come alive, and familiar faces began to appear. The first person he saw was Fatty. He was sitting cross-legged beside a huge bonfire with his hands supporting his chin. He seemed to be lost in thought. Beside him, Bai Ling and many others seemed to be holding some kind of ceremony. Everyone was holding a torch, waving it and shouting. Their feet were also moving according to a fixed pace. Looking down from above, the Fatty and the others looked like ants, giving me a strong feeling that it was unreal. However, at the same time, I felt that the scene in front of me was real and not something that I had imagined. I was confused. At this moment, I was in the monster region while the Fatty was in the human world. Even if I successfully advanced to Shaju, how could I travel thousands of miles to see the Fatty? While I was puzzled, the fat man's figure was just like the other souls. He quickly glided under me as if he would disappear in the next second. I panicked and tried to stop, but I couldn't control my body. Just at that moment, the Fatty seemed to sense something. He suddenly stood up from the ground and looked up into the sky. I thought he would see me, but there was only confusion and disappointment on his face. After a few glances, he sat back down and disappeared into the distance. Before I could think or investigate, Nangong's face appeared in my field of vision. He was also standing next to a bonfire with his hands behind his back. There was no one else next to him. He stood there alone and looked up into the sky. There was a mocking smile on his face. He seemed to be looking at me, but also seemed to be in a daze. His figure didn't stay for long, and he quickly glided under my feet. Turning around, I saw Zhang Canwen and Wang Li appear. The two of them stood together, each with a bonfire beside them. The bonfire next to Zhang Canwen was small, like a pea candle, while the bonfire next to Wang Li was burning fiercely. It was twice the size of his small body. The master and disciple stood looking at each other. Zhang Qinwen seemed to be explaining something to Wang Li, and he looked very engrossed. Wang Li suddenly lifted his head and looked around the sky. The scene changed. Zhang Canwen and Wang Li disappeared, and the evil sacrificial spirit appeared next to a bonfire. He looked the same as before, wrapped in a black robe. He looked a little blurry, but the strange thing was that the snake spirit was there. What was even stranger was that the snake spirit had transformed into its original form and was coiled around his neck, acting very intimately. Next to them, on the other side of the bonfire, the Kirin was sleeping soundly on the ground. When I looked over, the snake spirit and the evil sacrificial spirit didn't move. On the contrary, the Kirin lifted his head and looked as mischievous as before. Very quickly, they disappeared, but my heart wasn't calm. The last time I saw the Kirin, he had disappeared into the gate of the mountain and sea realm with Swan Ni's Jing Wei bird form. Now that the Kirin had appeared, what about Swan and I? What was going on with the scene I was seeing? Before I could continue thinking, two more faces appeared. This time, it was my parents. They were different from the previous people. They were sitting next to a small bonfire. They didn't move, nor did they lift their heads. Very quickly, they disappeared. I tried my best to turn my head to take another look, but I couldn't sense my body. The surrounding light suddenly brightened. Swan and I, Xiongqi, and Tao Tai, the three ferocious beasts, appeared one after another below me. They knelt on the ground and paid their respects. It was obvious that they had seen me. After the ferocious beasts disappeared, Emperor Prior and Wu Juzui appeared. The two of them were in the palace of King's City, looking at me from afar with their hands clasped behind their backs. When their gazes met, they nodded at me in greeting. Apart from the two of them, I also saw an old werewolf who lived underground, and a rock that floated in the clouds. It was obvious that they were the other two monster emperors of the monster domain. Although I had never met them, they also nodded at me in greeting. Just as I was about to retract my gaze, I suddenly shivered as I saw a patch of black clouds. Within the black clouds, a black-robed elder with antlers on his head stood there. He coldly glanced at me, as though he didn't care about me. However, just that gaze alone made my divine soul tremble and my heart tremble. Before I could calm my emotions, everything in front of me disappeared. Only the day became brighter, to the point where it was almost blinding. However, this didn't last for too long. Very quickly, a ray of rainbow light appeared in the white sky. After a short moment, the rainbow light split into two. One became two, two became three, until it was endless and filled the entire sky and earth. I couldn't help but think back to the Raho day when I'd first seen the rainbow. On that strange Luo-ho day, there was a similar rainbow light in the sky. However, when I raised my head to look at the sky, I couldn't see the dark nightmare, nor could I see the crimson-red sun that was cleansed by blood. The sky and earth were filled with rainbow light, and I was enveloped by the rainbow light. It was as though I had become a part of this gorgeous world. Abundant power and free will permeated the entire world. I was so happy that I felt like I had become the ruler of the world. So this was the rainbow light that ascended? Amidst the boundless happiness, I lowered my head to glance at the ground. Suddenly, I discovered that there wasn't any rainbow light there, but a long river of green water. On the other side of the river, there wasn't any rainbow light either. Instead, it was a pale white world without any color. There was a large group of people prostrating there. They were wailing and crying. Some were lying on the ground, shaking their bodies. Some were frantically kowtowing. There were also people who took out knives and cut open their bodies, letting their blood gush out. There were also people who were holding the fresh blood of others and their own blood as they continuously smeared something on the ground. The world seemed to last for a few centuries. The pale white world suddenly turned black. The people prostrating on the ground became even crazier. They were extremely frightened. Everyone started to cut open their own bodies and started to kowtow frantically. Behind them, a naked young man walked over. There was a dividing line in the middle of his body. Half of his body was pure and flawless white jade, while the other half was deep black obsidian. With every step he took, a white flower would bloom under his feet. It made him stand out from the pale white world. More importantly, he was standing on the boundary between the pale white and the dark. As he took a step forward, the darkness inched closer. At the same time, the wailing of the people prostrating on the ground became louder. The youth didn't walk fast, but he eventually reached the green river. The people prostrating on the ground had no more space left. They were being swallowed by the darkness. Thus, they went crazy and stared at the youth. They used the most vicious words in the world to curse him. No one cared about their powerless curses. The youth didn't even stop. He directly stepped on the green river and walked towards me. At that moment, the rainbow light that enveloped me seemed to tremble. The boundless happiness seemed to have disappeared. There was an indescribable fear in my heart. I wanted to curse loudly and use all my vicious methods to stop him. I didn't know why I felt that way. It was just an instinct. Instinctive disgust, instinctive hatred, instinctive disdain. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even move my lips. This youth couldn't be stopped. White flowers kept growing under his feet. Even though he was walking on the green river, he still didn't fit in with this world. Very quickly, he crossed the river and walked in front of me. This youth, formed from obsidian and white jade, looked at me with a smile at the corner of his mouth. However, in the blink of an eye, he took out a long sword and pointed it at me from afar. He said mockingly, Chapter 982. Ice-cold fear rose from my heart. This smiling youth had brought darkness to this rainbow-colored world. All the rays of light had turned into black ice. I panicked and wanted to cry out loud. I wanted to prostrate myself on the ground and worship him. I wanted to cut open my body and use my blood as a sacrifice. However, I couldn't do anything. The rainbow-colored light disappeared and darkness enveloped everything. I couldn't see anything and could only hear the long sword slashing my neck. Blood spurted out and my flesh and bones were all crushed. Just as my consciousness sank into darkness, a hazy light appeared in front of me. My body jolted and I opened my eyes. I discovered that the surroundings were already bright. A fiery red sun had just leaped out from the horizon, emitting a scorching light that was getting hotter and hotter. I was still sitting cross-legged on the surface of the Ruashue Lake. Everything that had just happened had already disappeared. It was as though I had just had an absurd and ridiculous dream. At that moment, I felt a slight movement under my feet. I lowered my head and saw a young, ferocious beast that was less than a foot long in the water. It was gnawing on my toes. This ferocious beast's cultivation was only at the monster soldier realm. Even though its teeth were sharp, it didn't pose any threat to my body. However, it didn't give up and continued to gnaw on my toes. Its eyes were filled with ferocity. "Even you want to kill me?" I smiled wryly and fished it out of the water, throwing it far away. Since my cultivation had reached the Monster Emperor realm, my physical strength had also increased. With just a casual toss, this young, ferocious beast disappeared without a trace. It had flown at least a few hundred kilometers away. Only then did I close my eyes to examine my current cultivation state. The sun god that was as tall as me had disappeared from my fate palace. There was only a small golden person sitting cross-legged in a pool of golden liquid. The small person seemed to have intelligence. When it sensed my inner vision, it instantly opened its eyes. Its pupils contained a rainbow-colored radiance as it silently gazed at me. According to the records of the second volume of the Death Scripture, an incarnation would be born in the Fate Palace after ascending. This incarnation was no different from the main body. It would also reside in the Fate Palace to cultivate and could also be summoned to defend against enemies. Most importantly, once the main body was destroyed, the incarnation could transform back into the main body. It was equivalent to having a second life. Although this function was magical, it was actually of the same origin as the Yang spirit. The difference was that after the Yang spirit left the main body, it still needed to find another host, while this incarnation was no different from the main body and could be completely replaced. With a thought, the small golden man disappeared from my life palace and reappeared next to me. Unlike before, the golden humanoid had completely transformed into my appearance after I arrived in the outside world. His actions, appearance, and demeanor were exactly the same as mine. When I looked at him, it was as if I was looking into a mirror. After looking at it for a moment, I kept it back and tried to mobilize the power in my body. Only then did I realize that there was no monster power in my meridians. With a thought, the golden power of Monster Ruler surged out. I didn't know when the monster power in my body had completely transformed. Back then, just a trace of the demonic Thearcha's power was enough to shock me. Now, all my cultivation has been transformed into the demonic Thearcha's power. It is imaginable how powerful the power is. However, after carefully perceiving it for a moment, I discovered something strange. Although all my cultivation had been transformed into the demonic Thearcha's power, there was still a ball of golden energy in my life palace. It was different from the others, and the power in it was much stronger. After thinking for a while, I understood that this ball of golden energy wasn't my own demonic Thearcha's power, but the power of Monster the Archpuppet. It was the power that I had drawn from my life palace to subdue the 4 vicious beasts. Although I had successfully advanced to the Monster the Arch, my power was naturally not on the same level as Monster the Archpuppet. Hence, I had to carefully preserve this power and use it when subduing the last vicious beast. After roughly sorting out my body situation, I opened my eyes and let out a deep breath. Now that I finally had Xiaoju's cultivation, there weren't many people in the monster region that could stop me. It shouldn't be a problem to leave the monster region. Next, I only needed to subdue the last vicious beast and make a trip to the dragon region to retrieve my eyes. Then, I could return to the human world. Of course, there were still 3 months before the last vicious beast was subdued. During this period of time, I still had to stay in Monarch City and feign civility with Monster the Archpuppet, Juzui, and the others. With that thought in mind, I stood up and identified the direction of Monarch City. After taking a few steps, I was already in Monarch City. When I was at Xiaju, My cultivation had already reached the stage of appearing and disappearing, traveling 1,000 miles in a breath. After Xiaju, it was normal for me to shrink the distance. Not to mention the distance of a few hundred kilometers, it wouldn't take long for me to walk from Monarch City to the other provinces. Just as I reached Monarch City and was about to return to the inn that I had stayed in previously, I heard the surrounding people discussing. After a total of 49 days of darkness, it's finally daybreak. I wonder which bastard had angered the monster the Arch. Don't spout nonsense. I heard that our monster region has given birth to another monster the Arch. That's why there was such a phenomenon. This is great news. I slightly furrowed my brows. When I woke up from the surface of the Rua Shui Lake, even though I had experienced an absurd dream, I only felt that I was in a daze for a moment. The sky didn't change much from before I entered meditation. It only changed from before dawn to after. Could it be that I had slept for 49 days in between? Moreover, it had always been night during these 49 days. With a tinge of shock in my heart, I released my divine sense and enveloped the entire Monarch City. Not long after, I heard all the discussions in Monarch City. Almost everyone was discussing the darkness that had persisted for 49 days. There were even many who were worshipping the monster the Arch, thanking him for bestowing light upon them. Seeing those people worshipping the monster the Arch with sincerity, I felt relieved. The monster the Arch, or rather, the Xiaju Celestial, was the pinnacle of power in this world. It wasn't surprising that the heavens and earth would change when they were born. Just as I was thinking about that, there was a sudden flash in front of me. Two figures suddenly appeared. I raised my head and saw that it was Emperor Pu-Er and Wu Juzui who had appeared together. They were looking at me with burning gazes. After a short moment, the two of them raised their hands and cupped their hands at me. Congratulations! When I was interacting with them previously, they still considered themselves to be my seniors. However, from their current actions, it was obvious that they had already treated me as someone of the same generation. Emperor Pu-Er was the first to laugh heartily. What a heroic youth! I've already prepared a banquet in the palace. We're just waiting for my son-in-law to return to drink and chat merrily. Apart from that, the birth of the monster the Arch is a grand occasion for the entire monster domain. I've already passed down my orders. From today onwards, for the next 7 days, every region of the monster domain will be in celebration. Wu Juzui, who was at the side, had a slightly disappointed expression. After all, this glory belonged to his son, Wu Huan, but I had snatched it away. However, after Pu-Er finished speaking, he spoke again. The birth of the monster the Arch is something that can never be celebrated. However, it's all thanks to Black Tortoise Immortal Sovereign's guidance that my nephew has such cultivation. It's a pity that Black Tortoise Immortal Sovereign isn't able to come on this day of success. It's a pity that Black Tortoise Immortal Sovereign isn't able to come. I awkwardly avoided the topic and asked, previously when I was advancing, I only felt that time had gone by for an instant. When I returned to Monarch City, I heard everyone discussing that the night had lasted for many days. I was panic-stricken. I don't know what the two sirs can teach me. Pu-Er waved his hand and smiled. It's fine now. Since you've advanced to the monster the Arch, you have the same lifespan as the heavens and earth. It's normal for natural phenomena to occur. Back when I was advancing, stars fell for 3 days without rest. If I remember correctly, when Brother Wu advanced, the Roashui Lake rose for 9 days in a row and hung high above the ground without collapsing. After recounting their experiences, Prior looked at me again with a somewhat rueful expression. He continued, "Worthy son-in-law, the phenomenon is related to the heavens, and it has lasted for such a long time. I have never seen such a phenomenon before. However, the phenomenon that occurs during advancement is caused by the heavens and earth. The grander the phenomenon, the more it proves that you are blessed. From this, my son-in-law's talent is truly enviable." Originally, I had only asked casually to change the topic. I didn't think that there would be such a trick to it. After the Dawn Ascension, there would naturally be a difference in realms. This point was not recorded in detail even in the second volume of the Death Scripture. Since Pooh had mentioned cultivation, there was no harm in asking him. After thinking for a while, I opened my mouth and said, "My master is an immortal." Previously, I didn't know when we would meet again. Now that my cultivation has made some progress, I don't have a direction to follow. I still need the two seniors to guide me. Here are my question. Wu Juzui smiled and sighed. No wonder you have such a cultivation at such a young age. Just your desire to improve makes one sigh with emotion. However, this matter isn't urgent. Let's first return to the palace. It won't be too late to exchange pointers during the banquet. Pooh also laughed. That's right. No matter how urgent my desire to cultivate is, it's not urgent. Let's first return to the palace. After we've eaten our fill, we can exchange pointers with each other. Saying that, he took a step forward. Wu Jizui and I followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, we had returned to the palace. What Pooh said wasn't false. At this moment, there were countless banquets set up in the palace. Even the servants and maids had begun to drink and party. This joyous atmosphere started from the palace and gradually spread to the capital before spreading to every corner of the monster domain. Just as Pooh had said, the birth of a monster emperor was a grand occasion for the entire monster domain. It was enough to make everyone in the monster domain rejoice. In this joyous atmosphere, I followed Pooh and Wu Juzui to the banquet in the main hall of the palace. After taking my seat, I couldn't help but smile. Under the toast of Pooh and Wu Juzui, I raised my cup of Monster Domain's fine wine and drank it in one gulp. After putting down the wine cup, I glanced and saw a slender figure standing at the corner of the palace's corridor. He was silently looking in my direction. Chapter 983. I sighed as Vivian ran away. The smile on my face froze at the corner of my mouth. The Monster Emperor's spiritual awareness could cover the surrounding 1,000 kilometers, but at this moment, no one paid attention to Vivian, who was just a foot away. The atmosphere of the banquet was still very good. After Pooh and Wu Juzui exchanged toasts and drank to their heart's content, their gazes turned towards me. Dear nephew Duo G, from what you see, what is the most important thing in the path of cultivation? Wu Juzui was slightly tipsy as he spoke about cultivation. It seemed that he was responding to my previous request. I hastily sat up and threw everything to the back of my mind. After pondering for a moment, I replied, on the path of cultivation, talent and perseverance are both indispensable. Apart from that, luck and opportunity are also needed. Wu Juzui chuckled. Cultivation in the secular world is like that, but at our level of cultivation, everything is different. No matter if it's you, me, or the other monster emperors, which one of us isn't a talented individual? Which one of us doesn't have perseverance and perseverance? Hence, for those above the monster emperor rank to advance, it has nothing to do with talent and perseverance, but only one word: luck. I frowned slightly. His words sounded reasonable, but talent and perseverance were two things that had no limits. Even if we were all monster emperors, there would always be people with more talent and perseverance. How could it be said that it had nothing to do with each other? Wu Juzui seemed to have seen through my thoughts. Without waiting for me to ask, he continued, of course, everyone having talent and perseverance is just one aspect. The most important reason is that the power of the monster emperor is unable to increase through cultivation. Unable to increase through cultivation? Then how should one cultivate? This was an answer that I didn't expect. I instinctively opened my mouth to ask. Wu Juzui nodded, but didn't directly answer my question. Instead, he asked, what do you think the power of the monster emperor is? The power of the monster emperor. Naturally, the power of the monster emperor. That's right, this is the power of the monster emperor, but at the same time, it's the power source of this world. Wu Juzui's eye shone as he looked at me and continued. The so-called power source is the most fundamental power in this world. This power isn't something that can be created by humans. It's a power that was born at the beginning of the world. The total amount is constant and won't increase or decrease. This kind of power that coexisted with heaven and earth No matter how amazing one's talent was, it was impossible to cultivate it. Only when you and I are in this realm can you use it for your own use. But that's all. That's why I said that the cultivation above the demon arch realm is only based on luck. If you're lucky and obtain 1 point, you'll be slightly stronger than others. If you obtain 2 points, you'll be slightly stronger. That's all. After listening to Wu Juzui's explanation, I remained silent for a long time. So this was the cultivation of the monster emperor and above. After thinking for a long time, I finally digested this information. I then asked, if that's the case, then the level of one's strength is completely determined by the amount of origin power. Then, different realms should have different names, right? This time, Wu Juzui answered directly. Of course, according to the amount of origin energy, there are 9 grades of Demon Emperor. You have just advanced, and you're already a first-grade Demon Emperor. Even though I have advanced many years ago, I'm only a second-grade Demon Emperor. I turned my gaze towards Prior. Without waiting for him to ask, Wu Juzui added, I don't know his cultivation, but according to my speculation, he is at least a 4th-grade Demon Emperor. Emperor Prior sat at the side and didn't say a word. After hearing Wu Juzui's words, he smiled and nodded, as though he agreed with what he said. 4th rank. Logically speaking, Emperor Prior was the actual ruler of the monster realm. His cultivation level was very likely to be the strongest among all the monster emperors, but he was only at the 4th rank. It looked like there was still a long road ahead of him after he became a monster emperor. As I thought about that, I asked curiously, what's the realm above the 9th grade Demon Emperor? Hearing that question, Wu Juzui and Prior looked at each other before bursting into laughter. After laughing, Emperor Prior continued, 9th grade Demon Emperor. Every time a Demon Emperor advances by a rank, the amount of origin energy required will increase by several folds. 9th grade Demon Emperor means that a person has almost obtained all the origin energy in the world. It also means that he has become a true god of the monster domain. Life and death with a single thought, eternity with a single thought. What's above that? Life and death with a single thought, eternity with a single thought. A true god. Was he talking about the so-called heaven's will? I clenched my fists tightly as my emotions took a long time to calm down. At that moment, Prior seemed to be in the mood to talk as he gazed into the distance and continued to tell me. It's said that cultivation is like a journey against the odds. But in reality, when one reaches our cultivation, one can truly be called a journey against the odds. Upon saying that, he paused and turned to look at me before continuing. Apart from luck and opportunity, there's another way to obtain origin energy. Do you know what it is? I originally didn't have the time to ponder over this question, but Emperor Prior, who had been smiling warmly, suddenly had a gloomy expression. I was startled as I instantly got the answer. Apart from luck and opportunity, the other way to obtain origin energy was to snatch it. For example, a second-grade Demon Emperor like Wu Juzui would naturally have the power to suppress a first-grade Demon Emperor like me. As long as he killed me, he would be able to snatch my Demon Emperor's power. After thinking it through, I felt as though I had fallen into an ice cave. There was only one thought left in my mind. Could it be that Prior and Wu Juzui wanted to take my life? Just as I thought that, Prior suddenly laughed out loud and patted my shoulder. Don't think too much. I have a cultivation of the 4th grade. That bit of power of yours might be useful to Brother Wu, but to me, it's just a drop in the bucket. Moreover, your origin energy was taken from my daughter. If I coveted that power, I would have taken it from Vivian long ago. Why would I leave it for you? I heaved a sigh of relief as I understood that with his cultivation, he could easily take my life. He didn't need to talk so much nonsense with me. At that moment, Prior continued to say, now that the human world's door is open, the monster domain is in need of manpower. With me here, you don't need to worry about your safety. I nodded completely at ease. Wu Juzui, who was at the side, continued Emperor Prior's words and said to me, in terms of luck and opportunity, you brat are the one who deserves it. If it wasn't for the current situation, Vivian's strand of primal chaos power wouldn't have been obtained by you. Primal chaos power? I frowned again. In actual fact, I had a question in my heart. Since the Monster Emperor's power was the origin energy, why didn't I directly advance to the Monster Emperor rank when I originally had that power in my body? Instead, I relied on Vivian's power to advance to the Monster Emperor rank. Listening to Wu Juzui's words, it seemed that there was more to it than met the eye. After I asked for guidance again, Wu Juzui started to explain to me. It turned out that there wasn't just one type of origin energy in this world, but 3 types. They were the origin of primal chaos, the origin of monster power, and the origin of Dao Qi. Out of these 3 types of origin energy, only the origin of primal chaos was born from the beginning of the world. It was the power that was born from the beginning of the world. Afterwards, the origin of primal chaos split into the origin of monster power and the origin of Dao Qi. The original Monster Emperor power in my body, as well as the Monster Emperor power that I currently possessed, all originated from the origin of monster power. The power that I obtained from Vivian that allowed me to advance to the Monster Emperor rank was the origin of primal chaos. In other words, only the origin of primal chaos had such a miraculous power. It was no wonder that Wu Juzui sighed at my good luck. After listening to the entire explanation, I had a rough idea. The Monster Emperor's power was the origin of monster power, while the human world's immortal Xiaju's power was the origin of Dao Qi. Both of these powers originated from the origin of primal chaos. If I guess correctly, the origin of primal chaos was most likely the origin of shaman Qi. Combining what Emperor Prior had said about the 9th grade Monster Emperor, the strongest person in this world should be the one who controlled the origin of shaman Qi, which was also the origin of primal chaos. It was no wonder that Tai Sui's corpse became the Heaven's corpse. The Heavens should be the person who controlled the origin of primal chaos. Or it could be said that he controlled the origin of all powers. Chapter 984. While I was lost in my thoughts, Wu Juzui suddenly extended his hand and patted my shoulder. It's good to be diligent, but going too far is as bad as not going far enough. You already have such a cultivation at such a young age. Even if you don't make any progress in your life, you'll forever be one of the people that stands at the peak of this world. Just enjoy it for now. Brother Wu is right. Prior swirled the wine cup in his hand as he agreed. When I first heard about the 9th grade Monster Emperor, I felt that the road ahead was long and that I was insignificant. But after thinking about it, it's a good thing that there's still a road ahead. If I were to really reach the peak and stand at the peak, how would I spend the rest of my life? Come. Let's drink to the fullest and celebrate that there's still a road ahead. After drinking a cup of wine, the feelings from before had indeed lessened. No matter what, I finally had a Xiaju cultivation and was one step closer to my goal. There was no need to be so sad. Prior placed his wine cup down before saying to me, "OG, according to logic, you should obtain your own fief after advancing to the Monster Emperor. It's just that in the Monster region, there are already 4 Monster Emperors in the 4 provinces. The issue of your fief isn't easy to resolve. How could there be such a coincidence that the 4 provinces coincidentally had 4 Monster Emperors? Combining with what Prior had said previously, I reckoned that the excess Monster Emperors that were born in the past had all become ghosts in their mouths. I was lucky to have the opportunity to drink and chat merrily in this chaotic world. Why would I still think about the matter of fief? I shook my head. I've been living in seclusion with my master since young. I'm used to living like a wild crane. I can't guard a region like the 4 Monster Emperors. Let's forget about the matter of fief. I originally thought that Prior would drop the matter after giving me a way out. I didn't expect him to be so persistent. You're a celestial, so you naturally don't want to bother with such worldly matters. But you have many bloodkin and clansmen behind you. You can't not think about them. Clansmen? After he said that, I realized my identity as a doghead man. The most important thing in the monster domain is bloodline. If it was any other real monster clan, when they become famous, they would first consider their own clan. Only a fake like me would be unaware of this matter. I was naturally happy to bring some benefits to Nam, village chief, and the others, but the problem was that I wouldn't be staying in the demon region for too long. Sooner or later, I would have to leave. Even after I leave, the demon region still wouldn't be able to see through my identity. By then, the dog-headed men would be enjoying the treatment of the demon Thearch's clansmen without the protection of the demon Arch. I'm afraid it wouldn't be a good thing, as it would attract a calamity sooner or later. Thinking like this, I hurriedly wanted to refuse again, but Prior extended his hand to stop me. He continued, "Although there aren't any fiefs on the scale of the 4 great provinces between the Northern Province and King City, there are still 3 ownerless cities. Next, there are 2 cities, each from a Northern Province and the Western Province. Even though the scale of the 7 cities can't be compared to the other provinces, it can barely be considered as a province. What do you think about using these 7 cities as your fiefs?" The fiefs of the monster domain weren't like the feudal kingdoms in the human world that were under the jurisdiction of the central government. They were truly independent kingdoms. The 4 great provinces only had around 10 cities, but Prior had given me 7 cities in one go. This was truly a generous gesture. I was extremely puzzled. From a certain perspective, my current monster, the Arch cultivation, was given to me by Prior. If he didn't agree, my marriage with Wei Weian wouldn't have been so simple. He single-handedly raised me to the monster, the Arch realm, and now wanted to give me fiefs. What was he planning? Also, Juzi, everything that I currently had originally belonged to his son, Wu Huan. However, from his current expression, he didn't seem to be unwilling at all. What was going on? I couldn't tell what their motive was, but since Prior had already said it, I obviously wouldn't be able to reject him. I could only temporarily suppress my suspicions and nodded, accepting this huge gift. I then continued to ask, if that's the case, what should I do next? Since I couldn't understand their motive, I might as well ask directly. There will naturally be people who will handle the matters of the fiefs. After everything has been arranged, you can just send your clansmen to the various cities to assume the positions of city lords. These aren't problems. What you need to do now is to stabilize your cultivation and prepare for the upcoming war. War? I frowned and continued to ask. Human domain? That's right. Prior nodded. The war with the human world. As expected, the war was about to begin. I already had a faint guess in my heart, but after Prior confirmed it, I still had many questions. According to what I know, the human world's door has already been open for many years. Why did the war only start now? Prior didn't reply, but Wu Juzui continued the conversation. The situation in the human world is different from the monster region. The spiritual power there is thin, and there is almost no ancient energy. When the people from the monster region go to the human world, even if we are the monster emperor, our cultivation will drop by a level. We can only use the power of the monster god realm. This is the reason why we haven't taken action against the human world yet. After listening to his explanation, I was instantly enlightened. No wonder the monster region didn't take action against the human world, even when they had the overwhelming advantage. No wonder when I met Wu Juzui in the human world, his power was on par with the sacrificial evil spirit, and he only had half a step into the Shaji realm. I thought that he had advanced to the monster emperor later, but I didn't think that there was such a hidden reason. My expression didn't change, but I was overjoyed in my heart. Originally, the monster region had the overwhelming advantage over the human world, but under such circumstances, the monster region's advantage was non-existent. If they were to hastily invade the human world, they would only be met with a crushing defeat. Of course, this joy was fleeting. Since Pu Laer decided to start a war, he must have considered this problem. I steadied my mind and continued to ask, if there is such a reason, then why are you attacking now? Could it be that you have already found a solution? Wu Juzui nodded. These years, I have entered the human world many times and lured large amounts of ferocious beasts over. Using these ferocious beasts as a medium, I have transported a lot of ancient energy to the human world. Of course, this is just the beginning. The most important thing is that the 4 great ferocious beasts are about to awaken. When the time comes, We only need to place the 4 great ferocious beasts in the 4 corners of the human world to form the Monster Emperor formation. Then, we will be able to guide half of the ancient energy from the monster region over. In this way, the human world will no longer be able to suppress our cultivation. They will not be a match for us at all. After listening to his words, my heart was filled with shock. All these years, I have always guessed that the monster region was preparing to invade the human world. It was only now that I completely understood their plan. When the gate to the mountain and sea realm first opened, there was no invasion from the monster race. Only a large number of monster beasts came out. I originally thought that they had accidentally barged in, but I never thought that it was all part of the monster race's plan. Compared to the monster race's meticulous plan, the alliance that I had established in the human world was only a small one. The influence it had on the overall situation was almost negligible. Fortunately, by accident, the monster race's plan was completely entrusted to the 4 great ferocious beasts, and I could control the 4 great ferocious beasts. In this way, when the monster race invaded, I only needed to control the 4 great ferocious beasts and destroy the Monster Emperor formation. Then, I would be able to reverse the situation in one fell swoop. At this moment, I could barely conceal the joy in my heart. I immediately cupped my fist towards Prior and said, "This is my monster region's 1,000-year plan. Duo G will naturally not hesitate to contribute his strength." Prior thought that my joy was because I was standing on the side of the monster region, so he didn't suspect anything. Instead, he smiled and nodded. In a clear voice, he said, "This time, your fief only has 7 cities. When we conquer the human world in the future, you can have as many cities as you want. Come, let's drink another cup to celebrate my monster region's 1,000-year plan." The heavy mood that had been weighing on me for the entire day was completely released at this moment. I poured a cup of wine from my heart, raised my head, and swallowed it. The atmosphere of the banquet reached its peak. After another round of toasting, I stood up to bid farewell. Prior once again refused me, saying that he had already prepared a residence for me in the palace. Furthermore, he had already arranged for people to bring over the entire doghead race. I would be staying in the palace for the time being. Chapter 985. The architecture in a monster region wasn't as exquisite as the human world. Even in the royal palace, the buildings were mostly made of huge rocks and longwood. It was extremely majestic, but not as exquisite. Under the guidance of the maid, I came to the side of an umbrella-like palace. It was the wedding room that Wei On and I used on the day of our wedding. At this moment, there were many red cloths that were folded into the shape of flower petals on both sides of the palace door. There was also a long red carpet at the entrance. The wedding attire was still there. When I walked into the palace, I saw Wei On sitting not far away from me. She was still wearing the traditional golden robe of the lion race, but it wasn't as complicated as the wedding attire. When she saw me enter, she immediately stood up and bowed towards me, but didn't say a word. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. I walked over and sat down. After staying silent for a moment, I told Wei On about the fief that her father had given me. After briefly explaining the situation, I continued to tell Wei On, even though our marriage was just a transaction, we still have the status. After Nam and the rest move in, you'll follow me to the fief. I won't be staying in the monster region for long. I'll need your help to take care of Nam and the rest's affairs in the fief. Even though I said that, in reality, Wei On would be the one in control of the fief after I left. It could be considered as giving her a place to settle down. At the same time, with Wei On around, the safety of Nam and the rest of the Doghead tribe would be more guaranteed. After hearing what I said, Wei On stayed silent for a moment before lifting her head to look at me. That's your Doghead tribe's fief. If you want to leave, you can just hand it over to Nam or the other tribe members to manage. Why hand it over to me? Duo G, you already said that our wedding was just a transaction. I've also gotten what I wanted, so you don't have to feel guilty towards me. I smiled wryly and hastily explained. Don't misunderstand. I do feel guilty towards you, But this matter isn't just because of guilt. Once I leave the monster region for a long period of time, Nam and the rest will enjoy the treatment of the Monster Emperor's clansmen without the protection of the Monster Emperor. It's only a matter of time before they attract a calamity. I'm worried about them, so I can only ask you to take care of them. Vivian listened to my explanation, and for some reason, she suddenly smiled. Then, she shook her head and said, "As long as you don't die, no one from the Monster Emperor's clan will dare to bully you. But don't worry, I've agreed to this matter, but it can't be considered as compensation. This is what I should have obtained from that transaction." Vivian had been sad and disappointed ever since she caught a glimpse of him at the banquet, but for some reason, she seemed to be happy all of a sudden. There was a smile on her face, and the sadness on her face had disappeared. Seeing her like this, I heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. "That's right. You deserve it. If you really want to compensate me, pick a longevity grass and give it to me." Vivian suddenly made another request. Longevity grass? This was a strange term that I had never heard before. Vivian saw that I didn't understand, so she started to explain. According to her, this longevity grass was a famous immortal herb in the monster domain. It only grew in the scattered star sea in the extreme north. Legend had it that consuming this immortal herb would increase one's lifespan by 200 years, and at the same time, it could make one stay young forever. Even with my current cultivation as a monster emperor, I was speechless when I heard about these two effects. The lifespan of a monster emperor or a Shiaju immortal was unlimited. With an unlimited lifespan, one's youth naturally wouldn't fade. These two effects were useless to me, but to a normal person who was below the monster emperor rank, it was comparable to an elixir. It wasn't surprising that Vivian would make such a request. I first nodded in agreement, before asking what kind of place was the Scattered Star Sea that she mentioned. The Scattered Star Sea is the holy land of ferocious beasts. There are countless ferocious beasts of the Monster Saint and Monster God realm. There are even ferocious beasts of the Monster Emperor realm. A normal person wouldn't be able to enter, and only the Monster Emperor could barely enter. Moreover, they might encounter danger. After listening to her explanation, my first reaction was elation. There were actually monster emperors among the ferocious beasts. Firstly, this meant that the world of the Monster Emperor wasn't as lonely as I imagined it to be. Secondly, it pointed out a path of cultivation for me. Prior had already told me that the only way to increase my realm in the future was to obtain the source of demonic power. Hunting ferocious beasts was undoubtedly easier than hunting other monster emperors. It was also more practical than obtaining the source of demonic power from other places through luck. Other than this path, the longevity grass was undoubtedly a good item. Apart from gifting it to Vivian, I could also bring it to the human world and gift it to other people that I was familiar with. Among the negative effects of an unlimited lifespan, the sense of loneliness was undoubtedly at the forefront. A large part of this loneliness came from the constant aging and death of the people around me. I didn't have much feelings towards this loneliness, but it didn't mean that I couldn't imagine it. The longevity grass would undoubtedly be able to temporarily alleviate this problem. After thinking about the matters that I had to do, I couldn't head to the Scattered Star Sea now. Thus, I told Vivian that I would make a trip there after 2 months. If I was able to successfully gather the longevity grass, I would bring it back for her. Even if I couldn't do it for the time being, I would definitely do it in the future. It was obvious that Vivian wasn't in a hurry. After hearing my promise, she revealed a smile and nodded, telling me that she would be waiting. After chatting about this matter, the subtle awkwardness between Vivian and me magically disappeared. However, she still excused herself and left. I similarly didn't stay for long. After sitting and thinking for a moment, I left the Imperial Palace and returned to the inn that I had previously stayed at in King City. When the snake spirit saw me, he heaved a sigh of relief. His concerned tone carried a hint of reproach as he asked me why I had mingled with Prior for so long, causing him to constantly worry about me. I was slightly puzzled as I asked, "Prior doesn't have any hostility towards me. What are you worried about?" The snake spirit shook his head. "I've heard from the people in the dragon's territory that Prior, is a terrifying monster emperor. Moreover, I can faintly feel this. A fourth-grade monster emperor represented the strongest power in the monster domain. It wouldn't be wrong to use the word terrifying to describe it. I didn't pay attention to the snake spirit's words and asked him what he had been doing during this period of time. What else can I be doing? I'm just waiting for your news. It's been a total of 49 days of darkness. If it wasn't because I knew that it was a phenomenon caused by you advancing to the monster emperor, I would have thought that the monster domain's doomsday had arrived. The snake spirit's face was filled with worry as he spoke. I had always felt that even if the sky were to collapse, the snake spirit would only laugh as he ran away. It was rare to see him so worried. The monster domain's doomsday. It doesn't sound like a bad thing. What's there to worry about? What's wrong with you? Could it be that you're jealous that I advanced to the monster emperor? I said half-jokingly. The snake spirit rolled his eyes at me, and the worry on his face lessened. He shook his head. Why would I be jealous? You might not know that our dragon race is unable to cultivate to the monster emperor realm. There's no point in being jealous. This was the first time I had heard of such a saying. I couldn't help but be interested as I immediately questioned him. The snake spirit then told me that the dragon race could only advance to the monster emperor realm after obtaining the power of the primal chaos. This was completely different from when I advanced to the monster emperor realm after obtaining a trace of the power of the primal chaos. To me, that trace of the primal chaos was just a catalyst. The essence of the monster emperor power that I obtained was still the source of the monster power. To the dragon race, the source of the primal chaos was their entire power. There was a huge difference between the two. Vivian's mere trace of the primal chaos was the rarest thing in the world. As for the dragon race, they needed a large amount of the source of the primal chaos to advance to the monster emperor realm. It was impossible to find it. That was why the snake spirit said that it was impossible for the dragon race to cultivate to the monster emperor realm. I frowned as I felt that it was unbelievable. If the dragon race didn't have a monster emperor, why did the dragon territory have such a high status? The snake spirit seemed to have seen through my doubts. Without waiting for me to ask, he continued to tell me that the dragon race actually had a monster emperor. He was the actual ruler of the dragon territory, the Black Dragon King. He was also the only monster emperor of the dragon race. The monster emperor of the dragon race that possessed the power of primal chaos would naturally suppress the other monster emperors, regardless of their rank. This explained the dragon territory's high status. After answering this question, the snake spirit mentioned Vivian. He told me that the reason why he had chased after Vivian was because he had sensed the power of primal chaos in her body. It was just that he wasn't aware of it at that time. He had only vaguely sensed it now. After understanding this matter, I also understood the changes in the snake spirit's emotions. I extended my hand and patted his shoulder. I didn't know how to comfort him. For the next half a month, I stayed in the inn and meditated every day to comprehend the power of the monster emperor in my body. I gradually familiarized myself with the usage of this power. Vivian didn't appear again. Poulailler didn't question me about why I left the palace. As for the snake spirit, the short period of worry that day seemed to be just a dream. He quickly returned to his normal state and went out to have fun every day. He was still living a carefree life. Chapter 986. The territory of the monster region was extremely vast. Back then, the spirit snake and I had traveled from a northern province to King City with the black dragon beast under our feet. Of course, this was mostly due to the fact that we were constantly on the move, as well as the fact that we took a huge detour from the western and southern provinces. However, even if we were to disregard these factors, it would take us at least a month to reach King City with the Black Dragon Beast. From this point, it was impossible for the Doghead tribe to travel such a long distance in half a month. They should have started their journey during the 49 days of night. Furthermore, they had ferocious beasts that weren't inferior to the Black Dragon Beast as their means of transportation. This matter wasn't worth mentioning. After all, the subordinates of Poulailler would carry out Poulailler's orders strictly. However, if this matter was combined with the fact that Poulaire allowed me to get together with Vivian, explained the cultivation above the monster ruler to me, and even took the initiative to give me land, it would be very unusual. All the signs showed that Poulaire treated me very well. Furthermore, this kindness couldn't be explained by the need for talents in the monster region. In this kind of explanation, everything else was understandable. It was either something that I had to do or something that I should do with my status. However, the matter of bringing the Doghead tribe to King City in advance couldn't be explained. Poulaire was a fourth-grade monster ruler, the ruler of the monster region. However, his attitude towards this matter wasn't just friendly, it was rather humble. In simpler terms, it was something that he didn't need to think about. It wasn't something that a superior should do. However, he did it. Why was that? I kept thinking about this question on the way to welcome the Doghead tribe, but I couldn't find an answer. In the end, I could only attribute it to my sensitivity. The Doghead tribe departed from the northern province. Thus, they didn't reach King City via the southern pier, but the northern gate. When I reached there, the two sides of the northern gate were filled with King City guards. Even the road had been cleaned. Not far from the northern gate sat a dozen enormous bird-type, ferocious beasts. They had 4 limbs under their abdomens, and their bodies were covered in tiger stripes. They were the Ingzhao beasts that were rarely seen in the monster region. They looked similar to the Ingzhao beasts that I had ridden before. However, they were several times larger, and their rarity couldn't be compared to the Ingzhao beasts. Between the Ingzhao beasts and the North Gate, hundreds of Doghead clan members stood there cautiously, waiting quietly. There were a few hundred of them standing together, forming a dense mass. They seemed to be much more numerous than the kobolds I had seen in Greenwater Village. However, since they were migrating their entire tribe, the kobolds who were servants in the city should have been found and brought along. Standing in front of the crowd were Namu and Chief Bill. The expressions of the two were completely different. Chief Bill's face was full of hardships and worries. He stood there with a pair of dim yellow eyes, looking into the distance without any spirit. On the other hand, Nam's face was full of excitement and anticipation. He would occasionally tiptoe and look around. At this moment, Nam was already in the middle stage of the Demon King realm. Of course, this kind of cultivation was nothing in Monarch City. The lowest requirement for the Monarch City guards standing beside them was to be a Demon King. The two people standing beside them who looked like generals had the cultivation of a demon god. Judging from their identity as werewolves, they were most likely escorting them all the way here. Seeing my appearance, Nam cheered. He raised his arm and shouted, "Duo G, I knew it was you. I told them that it was you, but they didn't believe me. Now you know, it's Duo G who has become our kobold monster emperor." The latter part of his sentence was obviously said to his clansmen behind him. I was a little curious. They had already rushed all the way to Monarch City, but why didn't they know who the kobold monster emperor was? After asking, the werewolf monster god didn't wait for Nam to reply. He bowed and replied, "Esteemed monster emperor, your name is as dazzling as the sun. It isn't something that lowly servants like us can call you directly. Furthermore, Emperor Prior's orders didn't mention your name. Thus, when your clansmen asked, we didn't have an answer. Previously in Rock City, not to mention the werewolf monster god, even a most ordinary werewolf clansman would raise their heads to the sky when they saw the kobolds. But now, the werewolf monster god actually referred to himself as a servant in front of me. I couldn't help but say that the authority that came with such power was really intoxicating. I didn't care about the two werewolf clansmen and only looked at Nam. I hugged him and laughed together. Duo G, even though I always felt that you would become the kobold monster emperor, I didn't expect it to be so fast. Nam was the first to speak. I took a shortcut. Let's not talk about this first. You, on the other hand, reached the Monster King's cultivation in just a few years. Not bad. Hearing what I said, Nam's expression darkened. He shook his head. My talent is still too low. You gave me so many beast pills, but I only managed to graduate from Fat Academy last year. I smiled and patted his shoulder. Don't be discouraged. You said that you wanted to become the kobold monster emperor. Even though you can't be the first, you can still be the second. Nam curled his lips. It was obvious that he didn't agree with what I said, but he didn't say anything else. On the other hand, village chief Bill, who had been looking at me in a daze, suddenly muttered, "How can a kobold monster emperor become a monster emperor? You aren't. You aren't a kobold monster." Just as I noticed what he said, a King's City guard hurriedly ran over and told me that Emperor Prior had already prepared a temporary residence for my clansmen in the inner city. Furthermore, he had something to discuss with me and asked me to head over. Since Prior had something to summon me, I had to head over. Thus, I instructed the guard to bring the kobold monster tribe to settle down. After explaining everything, just as I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered Nam's appearance when he told me about Emperor Prior. Thus, I turned to ask him, "Nam, do you want to meet the Emperor Prior that you worship?" Even the usually carefree Nam's expression froze when he heard my suggestion. After a short moment, he looked at me hesitantly and asked, "Can I?" "Of course you can." I didn't give him a chance to hesitate and grabbed his arm. With just 2 steps, we arrived at the entrance of the palace in the inner city. Prior was sitting alone in the palace. When he saw that I had brought Nam in, he had a confused expression. After a short moment, he recovered his usual smile and asked me, "Are these your clansmen? I heard that they've already arrived at King's City. How is it?" "It was a bumpy journey. Were there any problems?" I cupped my hands to express my thanks. "With your meticulous arrangements, of course there weren't any problems. This is a good friend of mine. Many years ago, I've heard him talk about his worship of you. Since he's come to King's City, I brought him here to take a look." Prior laughed heartily and didn't seem to mind. Instead, he warmly asked Nam a few questions about his name and cultivation. Just a few simple words made Nam's face flush. He was so nervous that he didn't know where to put his hands. After the short conversation, Prior's gaze returned to me. He didn't care about Nam's existence and directly said to me, "OG, there's less than a month before the primal chaos beast awakening ceremony begins. Do you know anything about this matter?" Hearing that, I was stunned. Of course I knew about this matter. In reality, the main reason why I came to King City was for this matter. It's just that Prior had never mentioned this matter to me before. Now that he suddenly asked me, I couldn't guess his motive. I even suspected that he knew something. After a short moment, I suppressed the waves in my heart and nodded. These few years, many people in the monster region have been discussing about the 4 vicious beasts. I've heard about it. Prior nodded. His expression didn't reveal any clues as he continued to say, "The other 3 beasts have already awakened, and the process was extremely smooth. However, the last primal chaos beast is extremely strange." I nodded and didn't say anything as I waited for him to continue. "A few days ago, I told you about the source of power. You should understand what the word primal chaos represents." Prior continued to say, "Primal chaos?" My gaze focused. Could it be that this primal chaos beast was related to the source of primal chaos? Prior seemed to have seen through my thoughts as he nodded. "You guessed correctly. The primal chaos beast is born from the source of primal chaos. It's rumored that through the primal chaos beast, one can peek into the source of primal chaos." My heart shuddered. On one hand, it was because of the information that he had told me. On the other hand, it was because I couldn't understand why he would tell me this. Even though we weren't like the dragon race who could only absorb the power of the source of primal chaos, the power was still much stronger than the source of our monster power. If the demonic thearchs were a group of sharks, then this information regarding the source of power would be the blood food that was scattered into the sea. Any shark that smelled the scent of the blood food would disregard everything and fight for it. Why would Pu Lair tell me such precious information? Even Wu Juzui wasn't here. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.